Thank you for coming to today's meeting. Just the standard things that we need to do. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone while speaking, even though I almost just forgot. Okay, thank you very much. And so we're just going to move on to the main agenda. When I've joined you, the thing about being all environmentally friendly and using electronic, you'll find the right place on the documents. So, appointment of substitutes. Do we have any substitutes today?
There are no substitutes this evening, Chair. Thank you.
That's great. Declarations of interest. Has anybody got a declaration of interest to make? Councillor Cross.
Chair, do I need to declare an interest for being a volunteer at the Repair Cafe, which is mentioned in the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan?
Probably not, but it's always useful, as Sean says, to over-declare rather than not, so I think that's absolutely fine. Has anybody else got anything that they feel they need to tell us about? I don't believe we have any public participation today. No. We need to make sure that if you do know people who would like to take part in public participation, they are made aware of the committee deadlines, because we're having to adhere to that quite strictly. Next, we have the minutes of the meeting. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes of the last meeting? 24th of June. Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if we could just have an update on the Warm Homes grant, please. It was mentioned that we were going to get something, and it's talked about April, but obviously, you know, it's County Council. Thank you.
I can take that, Chair. I've got an update from Ruth Correll, who, as members will know, now is employed by the County Council, but is seconded back to the City Council. And as chance would have it, Ruth's team at the County Council are leading on this project. So it's very helpful for us. So it's a County Council delivering the Warm Homes programme on behalf of the 3 South Worcestershire districts. The total capital grant's 3.2 million, with an average spend per property of 15,000. So hoping around 200 homes, a little bit more than 200 homes will be improved with energy efficiency installations or low carbon heating. Split over 2.5 years. Currently, they're in the midst of procurement, so the invitation to tender has been issued and planning to award a contract prior to Christmas, with some smaller supporting contracts commencing over the next couple of months. So just about to launch, I think, would be the summary of that.
Thank you, that's really good news. I think Councillor Cross also wanted to make a contribution.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also have a question about the minutes. Page 3, item 6, the street scene standards document. In our minutes, our head of city services said that fly posting and unauthorised advertisements would be included, and I was just asking how soon that we might start seeing that. Thank you.
Press my hand. We're currently working on that, Councillor Cross. We should be able to have a bit of a process in place before Christmas.
Again, another really positive update. Does any... Councillor Rudge.
Chair, thank you very much. The bit about help consider relocating bins bit, I think is very important. I'm wondering whether there's how that process is working, whether that's in place, whether we need to do something about it, whether officers are looking for feedback from city councillors.
Yes, Councillor, the process is in place now to just refer through to ourselves, and we'll be looking at the data that we're currently collating of the usage, footfall, etc. And then we can feedback if whether we can move that bin elsewhere. We're a bit tight for replacing bins if we haven't got somewhere where we can move a bin from, but that's not to say we can't have a look at that. So there is a process in place. If you could feed through, report it to ourselves, we'll pick that up and we'll feed back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. My final item relating to the minutes, please. The littering on Wainwright Road and the interplay between city and county, and there was it minuted about there being further discussion, and just wondering what the upshot of those was and how I can be helpful as a county councillor for that area. Thank you.
We haven't made any progress as yet. It's still on our to-do list to pick up and look at and feedback to committee at a later date.
I think that's the longest we ever spent reviewing the minutes. Has anybody else got any comments, requests for updates or items for clarification on the minutes? If not, is everybody happy to approve those minutes? Councillor Rudge.
Chair, may I, sorry to ask this question, but can I just clarify whether city councillors here, as city councillors, can ask questions in their capacity as residents? It happened last meeting, that's why I'm asking.
Do you want to just clarify what you, because I'm a bit, I can defer to officers to answer, but if I'm mystified, I suspect they're going to struggle as well.
Well, in the minutes it states that officers will discuss with city councillors some sensitive issues outside the meeting, and one of the questions was asked by someone as a resident, not as a city councillor. I'm interested because it's in my ward, and I want to know whether it's okay to ask. That the issue was about the fly tipping at Offerton Lane. Now, it seemed to me to be very dubious protocol if we hear as city councillors to ask questions as residents, and especially as it's sensitive information, and especially as it's asking officers to do work that they shouldn't really have to be doing to respond to people here as residents rather than city councillors.
Thank you for your clarification. I think that's really helpful. I'm going to defer to Lloyd in terms of answering that.
Chair members are here as elected representatives and not as individual residents, so they should talk as elected representatives and not on issues pertinent to them as residents.
Does that give you the clarity that you were looking for then? And I think maybe that's something we would be helpful perhaps to put in a members briefing, just to reiterate to all members, understand the protocols. We have got a relatively new council and I think that might be useful.
If that's minuted, then it saves that sort of silliness happening again. Thank you.
I'm just thinking whether it would be useful to go to all councillors, because it will apply across the committees, not just to this one.
Yeah,
And I'm not convinced that all members read all the minutes of all of the different committees that are taking place. So therefore, if we want to ensure that everyone's being treated equally and everybody understands the situation, and I think all the members that we do have ask questions in good faith, I think it's important that we all know that the ground rules are, without doing it as names. Just this is the clear procedure. Okay. Is everybody now happy to sign off the minutes with those clarifications and updates? Can I have a show of hands just so we can make sure we are all happy with that? That's good. That is unanimous. We have signed off the minutes. Let's hope this is not going to be a very long meeting at this rate. Okay, so that we're going to move on to item 5, which is the Q1 and Q2 performance reports. Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. I will keep this brief because I appreciate we have got a packed agenda. I just would like to remind members that Q1 has been circulated, but given that we only had a meeting in June, this is the first opportunity that has been in the public domain. But I am just going to concentrate just on a couple of items on Q2, and I'm happy to take questions at the end. We're still obviously scoring quite low on our household waste recycled and the residual household waste collected, although that's gone up slightly in the right direction. With still some work. So I'm pleased to say that we have now appointed to the Waste Recycling Education and Communications Officer, Lauren. Some of you may have already met Lauren and been working quite closely with her. And I just want to pick up just a couple of projects that she has been working on, and we will intend bringing something back to the committee at a later date with the outputs, etc. So one of the things that she's currently working on is a project that's called Not Sure Which Box. And for those who were on the committee previously, we talked around that wish cycling, that people will put it in the recycling bin, feeling that it should be recycled, but it's not necessarily able to go through our recycling streams. So we're going to be looking at some pilot areas, which will be high participation in recycling, but also we'll have that high level of miscapture. So we're currently crunching the data and we'll be coming back to work with the elected members in those particular wards that we pick up and work. And it'll be around the textiles, soft plastics, bagged recycling, that I think is the one things that come through our recycling stream at the moment. She did quite a good piece of work with only being in post, I think, a few days, around the cable challenge, about people storing probably millions of different charging cables. They've all got a drawer somewhere in their house, and she worked with some of the schools around recycling that alongside some of the businesses. So that was quite a good take up from the schools that we contacted. A lot of the eco schools wanted to work with us on that. So again, that's something that we'll look at, going through the data and some evaluation. And then the other project that she's working on is around remade fabric and looking at how we can recycle fabric that gets thrown into our recycling bins, etc. So those are the three hot of the press things that she's currently working on. So no doubt she'll be in touch with elected members once we start looking at which areas we're going to focus on. Also, a big part of her role will be around that contamination as well, which will be moreover than the wish cycling, will be the people who are putting things in the recycling bin, they're not looking at the recycling as a thing to be doing. And then finally from me, the other area I do want to just pick up on is, for the first time in a long while, is around our street scene assessments, and we have scored a little bit lower than we would normally. This was around some of the sweeping routes that we've currently reassessed and reconfigured, but also we've just taken charge of some new sweepers as well, so they're working really efficiently. So we're hoping that at next committee we will see a bigger impact on that. And I'll leave that there unless we've got any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, you know, some of the statistics on these is clearly showing the hard work of your team, particularly the decrease in the number of missed refuse and recycling bins. Could you explain to everyone, because I'm not sure everybody knows about the in-cab technology that you're using and what actually has made that happen? Thank you.
Yes, so earlier this year we changed the technology within the cab, so we've got live data. As your bin is collected, that information is put through the tablet within the cab, and that then is streamed straight back to Wandon Depot, so we can see at any moment where a crew's been, how many bins have been emptied, how many haven't been presented. Assisted collections is on there to remind the crews, but they've got a mindful of information in their brains that they don't tend to need to do that. But it's been really helpful, in particular when residents are reporting as well that the bins have been missed, but a lot of the time it's not been presented. So it's working really well and giving us that live data. Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, thank you also for the implementation of the QR codes and bin ID numbers. We've had positive comments from residents saying the issue of overflowing bins is getting addressed and sorted. So that's a really positive step, and thank you very much for that. I was very interested in, it was also minuted in page 5 of the minutes, sorry, I'm referring to minutes again, but about the location of where, you know, given our financial constraints, how we can't purchase new bins, but the possibility of swapping bins around based upon which ones are underutilised and which ones are overutilised. So interesting to see the picture building or data gathering about where these underutilised bins might be. just to say thank you for starting this process, and we look forward to getting that data. Obviously, too early to have information right away now, but it helps us to have that. And so just to urge, keep at it. Good work. Thank you very much.
I don't think that really requires that's a well done and a thank you rather than requiring an answer to you. So we'll go direct to, I'm assuming that you're not looking for an answer on that. So we'll go direct to Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, well, last year we looked at this, it's not an experiment, it's actually been done, switching to all black art bin collections on one day and all the greens on another day. And I was wondering how that was working out. Has that worked out as we predicted it would, or were hoping it was going to? And the other thought was, with regards to the green recycling, if the bin team gets to a bin that is quite clearly got contaminated with stuff that shouldn't be in that green bin, is there the ability to leave it, leave it and get any sort of follow-up? Do you leave it back to the householder? Do we take it anyway and it contaminates the whole lorry, or that sort of thing, really?
So if I take the first question, with regards to the changeover, we've seen minimal disruption. We've had very little complaints, and they were in the initial stages. So it's really settled well. The teams are getting really used to the areas and knowing where to collect the collection points are. So that has been really successful from our point of view, and has produced efficiencies from a round perspective. With regards to the second, that is going to be something that we're going to be working with the Waste Education Officer, looking at bin stickers, letters, waste audits, and doing that more detailed work. So that is in the pipeline for this officer.
I'm not seeing any other show of hands. Oh, I am. Councillor Rudge then.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible just to have a bit more information about the environmental fixed penalty notices? Because I'm ignorant, really, as to what... Is it dog fouling mainly, or are there other things?
It's dog fouling, littering, fly tipping, fly posting. So the Environmental Protection Act gives us the ability to issue fixed penalties on environmental crime. So we do the whole gamut. We don't break it down into how many we've done for littering, etc., for this performance indicator. But it is for any environmental crime.
Do we have any other questions or comments on the performance report? I'm taking that as silence. And I just want to thank you to the staff for putting together the report. I think it's very comprehensive. Cameron and I have been very much saying we want more narrative, explain more narrative, can you add more in? And I'm very aware that that's a staff time, but I do think it's very useful for members to understand that. I like the fact that this is at the start of the agenda and we have the opportunity to scrutinise it, but it's interesting, since we've had a lot more detail, we don't tend to scrutinise it as much. And also, thank you, it is looking all very positive, and I think that's down to the officers that are doing that work. So I think I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the committee. Okay, are we all happy to note that report and move on? Okay, great. So the next item is going to be on the annual goals review, and as this has a financial commitment that we are looking to be discussing, just and apologies that this is a very late amendment, we were just looking at amending slightly the wording of both this amendment and the one for the next item about funding. Just as you all know, we're in a very tight financial situation as a council. Therefore, we want to make sure that it is clear that this is a recommendation to P&R to look at as part of the budget setting process, looking at it in the holistic, because the danger is if every committee makes a massive commitment, it's going to be more than the council can do. So I don't think in any way it waters down the commitment. I think it's very important that if you've got comments about the importance of these, we make those clear so that those comments can be recorded and can be fed to P&R when they're discussing this. But we're looking at just making this minor word changing so that P&R, when they're making those decisions, are looking at holistically at the financial situation. So I'm going to defer to Lloyd to the exact wording of what we're looking to change.
So, Chair, I think very simply, item 6, the annual goal review report and recommendation 2. So it currently says that recommend to Policy and Resources Committee the approval of an additional £11,500. Now, usually that would then be a refer a report onto the next available P&R committee, which is in a couple of weeks' time. I think based on your comments, Chair, which I would agree with, that we would insert, so we would say recommend to Policy and Resources Committee, and then we would insert there as part of budget setting for 26-27.
So is everybody clear about what that amendment is, and are people comfortable with that? That's what we're proposing. I'm not seeing any dissent, and I apologise to the Vice Chair that this is a very last minute thing that I didn't have a chance to talk to her about. Okay, in that case, thank you very much. As long as people are clear with that, we'll invite you to come along.
Hayley.
Okay, Hayley, sorry. I'm so used to deferring to you to do the annual goals report that...
Sorry, you've got me tonight. Good evening, my name's Hayley Varney and I oversee the management of the GUL programme, and I'm here to present the information contained in the report. The purpose of the report is to update the committee on the GUL management during 2025 and the proposed work programme for 2026, and for the recommendation to Policy and Resources Committee to approve an additional £11,500 spend for the work programme in 2026. The proposal during 2025 were built around the successes from previous years, targeting discrete locations. These are identified in the report. This involved proactive and reactive egg, net and chick removal, working with Natural England to obtain the appropriate licence and to follow the removal requirements. Chick removal, where the unavailable proof nest to remove eggs to prevent breeding where eggs have hatched. This work requires us to develop procedures to physically enact the recovery of chicks in an efficient, effective and humane manner. Subsidised GUL proofing scheme, whereby the council pays for the access and the owner pays for the proofing works. In most cases, the council will already access in these areas to remove eggs, nests or the chicks. Subsidised GUL proofing. Additional funding was used to areas outside the GUL exclusion zone, mainly to residential areas where residents have been impacted due to the displacement of gulls from the city centre areas. Subsidised nest and egg removal from vacant BT building. Following significant nesting and causing significant nuisance locally, engaging BT to encourage prevention of future nesting. Anti-perching measures along the High Street. Summary last year, successes have been as followed. Increased proofing works, reduction in noise levels, work with property developers giving advice on proofing methods. The table in the report provides a breakdown of the GUL work carried out last year. It shows that nest and egg removal both increased last year. The increase was due to new roofs and areas where there has been GUL displacement, as well as new areas of evidence of concern for public health and safety. The GUL population survey is due to be conducted in 2026. Priorities for 2026. Proactive engagement with Natural England to ensure compliance with the law and licence conditions. Proactive and reactive nest, egg and chick removal. In order to ensure successful outcomes achieved in previous years are maintained where proofing is considered not to be feasible or financially viable. Subsidised GUL proofing scheme, the GUL exclusion zones only. As with last year, it is proposed to continue with the scheme delivered to date, but on a similar scale to within the existing budget. Additional GUL measures that could be employed within additional funding are as followed. The GUL population survey at a cost of £5,500 to confirm numbers. This has been pivotal in previous application to Natural England for lethal control. Subsidised GUL proofing to exclusion zone displacement areas at a cost of £4,000 to support local residents with access costs to enable them to complete proofing to their roofs. Subsidised nest and egg removal to BT vacant buildings at a cost of £2,000 to tackle a sub-colony of displaced gulls. Alternative options that were considered for GUL management. Enhanced GUL control work, repeating previously used deterrent hawking, discounted due to significant uplift of the costs. Widespread cull, discounted as under the existing framework this would be illegal. Contraception. Currently no medication or administration methods available. Has been used for pigeons but not gulls. Or do nothing. The council has no legal obligation to do this work. However, there is a significant negative impact on individuals and businesses caused by the goals. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very comprehensive report, and thank you for the summary. I think this is something we've debated. It's amazing it comes around so quickly. And I think as a past, we've been very supportive, and I think it's been another good year of work. So I wanted to start as chair of saying thank you to Regulatory Services for the work that you've done. I know it's made a difference to a lot of residents. I'm then going to go to Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you to you, Chair. Yeah, as a person who's one of my outside bodies is WRS, so I get up and I get even more information about goals. And I know that WRS they were saying that they've made such advances through the studies that they've done here that they're able to sell that service and advice out to other local authorities. And I think it's a good sign of how we're managing it. And I think it would be a bit short-sighted to let that control go now. It does need managing. We have caused this problem to ourselves by displacing the girls from their natural habitat. So they've moved here. If we're encouraging them away, and I think the kindest way of doing it is the methods we're using, it is to remove nesting material and discourage them rather than anything more aggressive. And I'm very pleased to see that anything that any birds are that they're taken care of. They're not got rid of. They are taken back and rehabilitated and taken back to their natural habitat, which I think is very laudable. So I'm very pleased, and I think it would be a bit short-sighted of us to let go of that control that we've done, especially as it's been so hard fought to get to this stage, and people have done so very well. And I think we should continue to forge forward with this within budget constraints.
Thank you, and I'd just like to echo everything that Councillor Holmes say. I think we've made a huge progress on this, and I think it's something that as City Council, we're very proud of the fact that we haven't retrenched back purely to our statutory responsibilities, and we're looking at the good of our residents. With that, I'm going to go to Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. Very, very worthwhile. And as in last year's report, I'm sure I'll be sharing it with one or two residents who asked me very detailed questions about it. My ward is the city centre and environs, and it's probably the hot spot or the source of displacement in some extent. So it's a very hot topic for many of my residents. And if I was to say what do they bring up on the doorstep, gulls are frequently it. So it's nice to see that the work is continuing. Just a couple of questions, though, after thanking you for the good work you're doing. Has anyone else in Worcestershire got a similar issue anywhere else along the river? Is it uniquely to Worcester? That's the first question.
It's not unique to Worcester. We are liaising with other authorities along the Severn Corridor, but it's not just restricted to the River Severn Corridor. Kidderminster, for example, have a significant gull population. They don't undertake any control work there, though, but there are a number along the Severn Corridor that do, so that's our primary focus, and we share best practice amongst that group. And we have had, through our gull officer, contact with other authorities that are leading with some areas of work, including in Scotland, at Dumfries and Galloway.
Okay, thank you very much. And speaking of best practice, the experience of residents and property owners in terms of making properties gull-proofing is really vital, and you feel the need if you live, as I have done in the past, under chimneys with gulls nesting at the top of them, and them raucously calling first thing in the morning is a real problem. Of the requests that we get for support to properties, how many do we have to turn away? Is it a large unmet demand? What's the situation with this?
We haven't turned any away yet, in that we work with the residents to do what's best for their roofs. And that, as you can imagine, there's a scale of things that one could do. So sometimes just talking to the neighbours about not feeding birds, particularly the gulls in their garden, will improve the situation to where, if we're doing full proofing on a roof, there's obviously a financial cost there. Where we can weave it into the work that we're doing in terms of in our gull exclusion zones or where we're doing the nest egg removal as part of our routine work, then we can assist with some financial contribution, but there will be at least some element that the residents will usually need to pay in terms of to assist with the proofing, depending on the circumstances of their roofs, largely.
And in terms of the best practice, which you mentioned, are the property owners of Worcester getting experienced, and the contractors who might be doing roofing work for them, are they getting experienced on how to best deter gulls, or are they wholly dependent on our good officers to know what to do? What's your experience of this? It's quite surprising to me that there is no unmet demand for our grant support. We can support everyone who asks for it. That sounds a bit unusual in terms of grant schemes that I've been familiar with.
Because it's not strictly a grant scheme in that they're contributing as well. So if they're not in a position at this time to be able to move forward with their financial element of it, some of those have been on hold, for want of a phrase. But largely where we've been able to assist, people have tried to get the money together to be able to work with us to do that. In relation to spreading the knowledge about the best practice and guide, we've been fortunate to work with one contractor that has assisted us in developing techniques and trialling them for free, taking a financial hit themselves in terms of some of those trials. In fact, a couple of contractors, one of which is been particularly fruitful. So a lot of the work we're currently doing has been born out of that work, where we've been working with them. They've trialled a couple of things, we've seen that it's working, and we've continued to implement that. And we continue to maintain a watching brief, because they're clever birds and they will adapt to changing circumstances. And we've had a couple of things that haven't worked, and we've had to stop doing that or stop proposing that. But in the main, it is the steel cages that have worked particularly successfully around the chimney pots, or in where the chimney stack comes down to the roof, at that angled location. That's worked really well. Some of the spikes have also worked well in particular locations, but we are learning all the time. We're working with the contractors that are willing to adapt with us to do that. And we're happy to share that, because in general terms, that's a positive thing to do. Where our commercial savvy has been around about our liaison with Natural England and organisational licence, so it doesn't restrict our ability to kind of sell our wares in terms of our expertise there. But so we're happy to share the knowledge we have about proofing and where it's working with our contractors or people across the city.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to go to Councillor Cross and then Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers. I mean, this is evidence of a really successful programme thus far, and completely understand our constraints, financial constraints, and also logistical constraints about actually one can't make all of the city an exclusion area or exclusion zone. Just wondering what advice should we be giving to residents who are concerned, residents outside the exclusion areas. People contact us saying increased gull numbers, let's say in parts of Warner Villages and also in Blackpool area. And so what advice should we be giving? Obviously there's distinctions between whether it's nesting gulls or just resting gulls, but really happy to receive information that we should and share that and disseminate that amongst our residents about the ways that what options are available to people who have got a real problem, because obviously that's sort of the intervention level. You can't say help when it's just a bit of noise, but having spoken with residents, people just who are nosed through other things, so not in any formal capacity, but people saying, oh yeah, it's been terrible, getting dive bombed daily, risk of falls for elderly people, sleep deprivation, as a colleague just said, over time that has longer public health issues and mental health issues for people as well. So I appreciate, in terms of the public messaging, how we manage expectations and what we can do for people outside of exclusion areas and what help would be available to them. Any guidance welcome, thank you.
If I may, Chair. Thank you. anybody who is their health is impacted in the way that you have been describing, please get them to give us a call. And I'm very grateful to have the Gull officer, technical officer, Chris Green, sat behind me, who will happily receive those calls and give advice to those residents on a case-by-case basis, because everybody's circumstance is slightly different. Where we have got that public health and safety issue, that would allow us to work within our current organisational licence, or the organisational licence we have traditionally been having. And that will allow us to do lethal control as well as the non-lethal control methods. So it gives us more options. Obviously, there is a cost to that, and there has been a focus with our limited budget to focus on the gull exclusion areas, because that's where we had the largest impact. But we have been able to work outside of that with some of the enhancements we had last year, and historically we have as well. In relation to advice to residents or developers or contractors widely, we're happy to talk to them about design and if they're looking to do something new. In relation to existing problems, we can talk through what might work in terms of gull control. And our contractor would similarly do that as a private enterprise. We contract with them as well. So that, please contact us and we can signpost them and talk them through the options. We're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Boone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this annual update. Looking at the table in the report that shows the nest removal, egg removal and chick removal figures, it shows that the targeted approach this year has really worked. You know, we're looking at 184 nests, that's the most you've ever done, 373 egg removals, significantly higher than you've ever done. And what pleases me most is only 2 chick removals. I know I get questions from residents about their concern for animal welfare. These are creatures who are protected by the Wildlife Countryside Act. So this strategy, for me, is very welcome. I do sit on P&R committee and I will be championing the extra funding. I think what I will be trying to get across to people, and please tell me this is right or not, is that to get that confidence from Natural England that we are doing the right thing, these kinds of numbers going in this direction, knowing what our population is, we need to spend this £5,000 to get the survey done. Otherwise, they will lose confidence in this. So, you know, if they're not going to fund all of the work, then not funding that would be actually quite disastrous. But also, you know, this is, to me, it's a very tiny sum of money in the context of the debt or problems that we've got as a council, which, you know, we're talking about huge sums of money, and the difference you're making with this tiny amount, with this targeted approach. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more in detail about, because I know that we talked about the High Street particularly, because I witnessed a girl coming down on a child and they took a sandwich out of their hand outside the train station, and this is what made me think that we needed to target it. If you can just tell us a little bit more about that targeted approach and like what you would do, what's missing that you could do more in the city centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot in there. Start from the top of what you first spoke about and the lethal control figures. You're right, the nest removal numbers and the egg removal numbers are particularly high. That was because of particular health and safety issues that were identified in the locality of the BT Tower with the schools, the health centres there, as particular receptacles to that safety issue. And it's that kind of targeted approach that has enabled those numbers to be higher. And obviously we want nest removal to be higher and the egg removal to be much lower. The chick removal one has been really tricky, particularly this year, because the birds were breeding earlier than usual, and we've been trying to keeping a very close eye on what's going on in the city to ensure that to minimise the number of chicks that we've had to take. Some of the chick numbers for previous years, though, were from birds that had flown down onto the ground, but were not, well, or dropped down onto the ground, but weren't able to fly. And so for their benefit, we took them and took them to be rehabilitated, rather than because we removed them from roofs. And that's the primary reason for taking chicks, really, rather than anything else. you talked about the survey. Yes, the survey is particularly important. It's not an exact science because there's lots of different methodologies that could be used, but it gives us an indicative number. We've used a particular contractor to deliver that survey over a number of years, and they are a gold specialist, and they've been able to do that on our behalf in the past. That's really helpful for us to understand what the population looks like, what changes have happened, where they are, and whilst this is all about girl control, what we're trying to do is manage a viable population that has minimal disturbance on our residents in the city rather than eradicate them. I know some people may not want them in the city, but how we operate under the licence, to comply with the law, it's about minimising that negative impact of the birds. And so that population survey will help us understand what landscape we've got and ensure we are acting responsibly as an organisation and that we can comply with the organisational licence that Natural England will hopefully give us, because we'll have that evidence to be able to put forward. And then your final point about the targeted approach. So what a lot of the work that Chris does is liaising with residents to identify that harm, documenting it, documenting what we've tried to do through non-lethal control methods to ensure that we're doing everything we can without removing nests and eggs and chicks. And then where they have failed, that's our evidence base to be able to take action under the organisational licence. So that one-to-one liaison with the person who's particularly impacted is really key and important. And so, as you said, Councillor Cross, if your residents could contact us where they've got their issues, and we can walk them through that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. I should have made this point earlier. I'm Vice Chair of Licensing and Environmental Health, and we've been releasing, in line with the rest of the country, pavement licensing, and pavement licence for cafes and stuff like that, and how unpleasant that would be for people if we had that return to the high numbers of girls. It wouldn't be very pleasant. It would be an attractive target for them, and we'd be losing that ground. Again, you know, the ability of having an open city where we can enjoy the streets without causing any conflict would be lost. And there's also the environmental health of the seal, the feathers and the droppings and stuff like that is very bad, and it needs to be cleaned up. So the less we've got to clean up, the more money we're saving ourselves. So I just wanted that point brought to PNR.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just respond to that point. We work with our licensing and our food specialist colleagues to ensure that the messaging gets through to the proprietors of those businesses that gained pavement licenses, that where they can use canopies to prevent the birds being able to swoop down, that's a real positive. And also about the clean removal of waste off tables, wherever possible, have bins that people can self-serve and remove their waste. And that's an ongoing thing, and Chris is available to talk to businesses if they need assistance as well. Thank you.
Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good points about the benefits, the cost benefits impacting other budgets, other budget areas, and our economy relative to the small cost of guard control. Just thinking, am I right in? Is my supposition right that with this it's a matter of keeping on top of it? If we were to cut back and get behind the curve, that it's then a lot more expenditure to then get back on track and restore the benefits that residents would and businesses would be feeling very, very soon.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to speak? I'm seeing a lot of nods around the table, and I've heard nothing but positivity about this as a proposal. So if I'm reading the room right, I think this is something that people are very supportive of. I think we've historically been very supportive of it. It was interesting that Councillor Scott said that he's actually shared the committee report on girls with residents in the past. Interestingly, I've done that on a number of occasions as well. It's probably the only area every year that somebody asks me, and I end up saying the easiest answer is just read the report, because there's too much detail in there for me just to put in an email. But it is interesting that I'm not the only councillor that's doing that, and it is something that I think demonstrates the responsiveness that we have as councillors, as a city council, to the issues that are important to our residents, not just the ones that we're legally obliged to do. So I'm hearing a lot of nods around the room. I'm going to take it that we've all noted the contents of the report. However, I am going to ask for us to vote on the recommendation to the Policy and Resources Committee. Do you want to just, Lloyd, remind everyone of what the amended wording is?
So recommendation 1.2 would become recommend to Policy and Resources Committee as part of budget setting for 26-27 the approval of an additional £11,500 of revenue expenditure to undertake the Gull Control Programme during 2026.
And Councillor Lewing, I don't know if I've got any other members of PNR. I know Councillor Lewing is on PNR and Councillor Scott. So we have two people who will be able to refer to the minutes and refer to the strength of the support, I think, in this room that I'm reading. So is everybody supportive of that? If you are, if you could please raise your hand. So yes, I'm not reading it wrong, but that is unanimous support in favour of that. And I'll be looking to Councillor Scott and Councillor Lewing to be advocating on behalf of the committee when it comes to that discussion. Okay, and we're going to then move on then to item 7, which is the proposed use of hydro-treated vegetable oil.
Gareth's going to take this one.
And Gareth's going to come and talk to about this. And again, as Lloyd explained, we're looking to make the same minor amendment in relation to the ongoing costs. I think we...
Yeah, so just to give Gareth some time to settle in, Chair, if members were to approve the one-off capital spend for the HVO tank, members can look to do that through the Environmental Sustainability Reserve. So that's delegated to this committee to make that decision. But obviously that would be subject to PNR approving the ongoing revenue, the revenue costs associated with the use of HVO. So that subject can be made in principle tonight, subject to any future decision taken by PNR.
So just to clarify, if we go ahead with this, we would be clarifying that the money would come at our discretion to be able to fund that capital cost, but clearly we wouldn't actually shell out that money until we knew that actually there was the ongoing revenue commitment. Okay, with that, I just think it's useful to have that clarity, and we'll go together.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name is Gareth Roberts. I'm the Fleet and Compliance Manager for Worcester City Council, and I'm just going to present a brief overview of the report for the use of HVO fuel for Worcester City Council. So the report is looking at the installation of a HVO tank at the Warnden Depot, running the vehicles based there using HVO fuel. The current situation is that in total, the Worcester City Council operates 75 vehicles. Of these 75, 7 of them are electric powered. 7 of them are electric powered, 1 is petrol powered, and the remaining 67 are run on diesel. The 67 diesel powered vehicles, 43 of them are based out of the Warnden Depot, and these 43 vehicles account for 91% of all the diesel annually used by the whole fleet. Currently, the diesel at the Warden Depot is sourced via a diesel tank that is situated on site and owned and operated by Worcester County Council. Worcester City consumes around about 280,000 litres of diesel per year from this diesel tank. Converting those amounts of diesel utilised by the whole fleet, which is around about 300,000 litres, the fleet produces 810 tonnes of carbon per year. This accounts for 41% of the council's entire carbon output. With the current renovations currently at Astwood Crematorium underway, which will see their carbon output reduced to 0, if we continue to utilise diesel for the fleet's contribution will rise to 52% of the whole council's carbon output. So very briefly, what is HVO? It's hydrogenated, I believe I pronounced that right, vegetable oil. It is a renewable biofuel produced from waste cooking oil, crop-grown oils and waste palm oil production. It reduces the carbon output of a vehicle by 90%. 90% compared to it running on diesel. It also has the added bonus of being compatible with diesel. This allows a vehicle to be run on HVO with no modifications required and no impact on the vehicle's performance or maintenance figures. HVO is more expensive than diesel though. Although the two products are not linked, historically HVO has sat around 15 pence per litre more expensive than diesel. This has fluctuated over the past 12 months from HVO being the same price as diesel at one point to its current price of £1.39 per litre, which is about 31 pence per litre more than diesel in terms of the prices that we pay for it. With the volumes, the operation will require around about 25,000 litres per month or 300,000 litres per year. And this would come at a cost of £417,000 per year, with its current price of £1.39 per litre. The installation of a 20,000 litre tank, HVO tank at Warndon Depot will also come at a cost. The initial outlay will be around about 35k for the tank itself, with an additional 1,500 for on-site work required for the installation of the tank. The impact of running HVO, by switching from diesel to HVO, we will see a reduction in the fleet's carbon emissions from 810 tonnes per year to 180 tonnes per year. This is a 78% reduction. As a whole, the council's carbon output would drop from just over 2,000 tonnes per year to under 1,000 tonnes per year, although that figure also incorporates the crematorium's reduction as well. Other benefits include the reduction of air pollution, with HVO reducing nitrous oxide by 27% and particle matter by 84%. So it is the recommendation that the City Council does switch to HVO fuel for its fleet, with other alternatives such as switching to electric vehicles or even hydrogen power being discounted due to the extreme high cost and operational difficulties. The switch to HVO is the City Council's only viable option in terms of reducing its carbon emissions. Thank you.
Yeah, before we go to Councillor Cross, who I've got down first, Lloyd's just going to give us.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to sort of set the report in a bit of context, I suppose. We did look at HVO fuel 2 or 3 years ago initially, and at that stage there weren't many councils that had progressed to using it. And we wanted to take a bit more time to understand its implications better. Obviously, during that period, we then trialled an electric refuse vehicle, which didn't work for us in terms of usability. It just didn't have the distance that we required, and there were some other operability issues as well. We also know the cost of new electric refuse trucks in particular, and they are particularly cost prohibitive. And David and David's team commissioned a piece of work around what electric infrastructure would look like for our depot, which I think even surprised us, David. And you've dealt with some big projects in your time, so there were some real infrastructure challenges as well. So as it stands, members wanted us to come back and take another look at HVO, and this is what this report does. And since that time, many other councils have now moved to using HVO as an interim solution. So hopefully that helps, Chair, just to set in a bit of context.
I think that is really useful. Just before I do go on to the others, can you just because our other people probably ask these, if you just go through, can you just talk us through the costs and the recommendations, then I will go to questions, because it is quite complicated, and just in terms of it would be useful. I'm sure members will have questions about that.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the cost implications, as Gareth has said, HVO fuel currently is sitting at about 29 pence per litre more expensive than diesel, and it will generally be more expensive than diesel at all times. Over the last couple of years, our fuel budget has increased. We increased it as a result of the war between Russia and Ukraine, when fuel prices went upwards. And we've reduced that fuel budget over the last couple of years, but we've kept some headroom just to deal with any volatility around diesel prices. So even though HVO fuel is more expensive than diesel, because we've kept that fuel budget slightly higher than what we've required, the actual increase to the fuel budget we need, based on the current HVO price, is £17,000. That would take the fuel budget up to £420,000, and I think it's currently £403,000. The important thing to point out to members is that given HVO is more expensive than diesel, based on current diesel prices, we are underspending our fuel budget. So that is money that's a cashable end of year bonus for us, or potentially there's a cashable saving for us in future years if we were to remain using diesel. So it's important to point that out. Albeit, I think the case from an environmental point of view is very strong. Conscious that we are facing a budget gap over the next couple of years as well. However, you know, in terms of progress with the environmental sustainability strategy and the action plan, this would be a huge tick in the box.
So hopefully everybody understands that the ask that would be going forward to policy and resources to look at as part of the budget setting is the additional 17,000, which brings the overall budget to 420, which is the second point in recommendation 3. And then there is the one-off which we could meet from the sustainability fund, which we have discretion over for the actual tank. I just thought it was useful that everybody knows what we're debating and how that works out, because it is quite complicated. I'm then going to start taking questions. I've got down Councillor Cross, then Councillor Holmes, then Councillor Scott, and I'll pick up others as we go through. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. I do have 3 questions, so I'm happy to do them individually or roll them all into one if that suits. So the first one is actually more of a comment, but it's a bit like, am I right in thinking, let's turn it into a question, am I right in thinking that the cost of air quality, a bit like the cost of a gull problem, is greater, you know, cost of poor air quality is greater than the cost of what we're looking to do here to make an impactful improvement. Certainly bang per buck, this seems to be a very big bang for a relatively small financial outlay. One question I have is a new tank needed for HVO if we're running down or dwindling down? If we've already got a diesel tank, do we need to replace that? We've got a large diesel tank. If you don't need to have a segregated tank, as I understand from HVO and diesel for the vehicle, does one need to have a separate tank for the HVO fuel on site? Because by 2026, 27, we'll end up with just the one diesel vehicle left, if all goes to plan, if this all goes ahead. And the other point was, I was about to ask about feedback from other councils which have used HVO, what feedback we've received from them that we're able to incorporate and include. So that was my third question. Thank you.
Just on the first point around air quality, yes, it would deliver local air quality benefits. That goes without saying. But it's just worth putting into context that vehicle movements associated with poor air quality in Worcester City are far more driven by non-council vehicles than they are council vehicles. So yes, there will be a benefit, but it's non-council vehicles that are contributing more. The second point around the tank, and Gareth may want to come in on the back of me, the current diesel tank is not our tank. It's the county council's tank. So that's why we would need our own dedicated tank for HVO fuel. And I'll let Gareth pick up the third point around feedback from other users.
Yeah, thank you, Lloyd. Yeah, so just to, off the back of Lloyd's thing, yeah, the tank unfortunately isn't ours. You are right in saying you could put HVO in that diesel tank and run it, but unfortunately with the age of the county vehicles operating out of there, it's not an option that county want to go down. So as we don't own or operate that fuel tank, that unfortunately isn't an option. It was something that we did look at. In terms of feedback from other councils, so I spoke with Malvern Hills, who have operated HVO for a number of years now, starting off on a small percentage of their fleet, and have now moved to, I think all of their vehicles now operate with HVO, and there's been minimal change in terms of their MPG, any kind of problems with maintenance or anything like that. It's almost like a plug-in and play fuel. In fact, it's some of the reports and everything that I've been reading have called it a drop-in fuel. So you can just drop in and just put it straight in. There's not much impact at all. So it is just like running diesel from all of those other points of view, with the exception of the cost.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite sort of on the practical point, sort of like diesel prices have been quite variable, and I was wondering how stable, do we know how stable the HVO prices are? Are they more predictable? Also, I was wondering if we'd be able to, if it's interchangeable, if we had to, we could swap easily enough back from HVO if it suddenly became very expensive or unavailable, so there would be lower risk from that point of view. And then putting my environmental health hat on again, we've spent a lot of time and effort on this air quality action plan, and to not see through something, to set an example to other road users in the city, I think would be, would be, put your own house right first. And should we eventually end up going forward for a low emission zone, it would be good if we could actually operate our own vehicles without having to fine ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of cost variance, HVO and diesel are not linked or shouldn't be linked financially. You are right, diesel has stabilised over the last 12 months. It has crept up slightly. Right now, we are paying 5 pence per litre more than I was in January for diesel. But HVO has spiked slightly. Unfortunately, with the US enforcing tariffs on the HVO production, a lot of demand has now come over to the European sourced and Asian sourced. So the prices of those, the supply remains the same. So the demand has gone up. So prices have gone up. When we initially did this report, HVO was 123 a litre, and it's now 139 a litre. So and in that short space, it spiked, where diesel hasn't. So there is that's where we are at the moment. It does fluctuate, but so does diesel, unfortunately. So there are risks in both. But historically, HVO has always been about 15 pence more expensive than diesel. And then in terms of if the worst case scenario, it became too expensive to run, could we switch back and operate diesel? Yes, we could.
Thank you. Lloyd just wants to make a point, and then we'll go to Councillor Scott.
Apologies, Chair. Councillor Holmes referenced the Air Quality Action Plan, and we do have a specific line within the Air Quality Action Plan about investigating the use of HVO within our fleet. So that would be us being able to show progress with that, which government will judge us on, will assess us on in terms of progress with our Air Quality Action Plan. The flexibility around being able to switch from HVO to diesel is there. That's one of the beauties of this. Albeit, if we were to commit to spending £40,000 for an HVO tank, there may be times it's sat there doing nothing. The reason I say that is, however, I personally don't see the cost of electric vehicles coming down anytime soon. And when I say this is an interim solution, it feels to me that interim solution is possibly 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. 10 years for us. So there may be times that we switch on and switch off, but what it does, it's there to serve us well, hopefully over the next 5, 10 years.
Yeah, I think the cost of electrifying, to the extent we could charge lots of vehicles, is going to be huge, and you've also got more of a risk of fire and stuff like that. So I think also, speaking of someone who works with large diesel vehicles on a daily basis, the ability to not smell diesel would be lovely. And I did actually wonder, something I made up, does it smell? Are we going to smell dust carts going past and think chips?
No, there's no additional weird smell to HVO, no.
glad you asked that. It was the one thing none of us had asked. Yeah. Councillor Scott.
Just want to say that what applies to a large fleet doesn't apply to domestic vehicles, and I think we should be still encouraging the transition from fossil fuels in our domestic fleets to electrification. And the cost for cars, electric cars, will be rapidly falling down to the level of petrol and diesel cars. So I think it's very different for domestic cars, I'd say. I was going to ask the same question about the actual emissions from these vehicles. They will still be producing carbon, but the carbon is produced, is spare carbon because the oils have already been used and produced organically or in the real, in botanically, grown by plants. And if we weren't using it, it would be discarded, presumably. So it's a free fuel in carbon terms. Am I right? Maybe some of my colleagues would correct me on my carbon calculations. In terms of the actual emissions, apart from the potential slightly different smell, and what sulfur dioxide is removed completely, is it? That's the question. And I would still. I think I'd welcome this, particularly as it gives the flexibility of transferring from diesel to vegetable oils and back again as the price allows. Thank you.
Right. So in terms of sulfur removal, I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure. In terms of the carbon reduction, yes, it reduces it by 90%, and you are right in terms of it. It's the waste carbon that's burnt off, but it'll be a 90% reduction from what comes out of the exhaust pipes of the refuge vehicles and sorry, all the other fleets that we operate will operate from. So I have forgotten the second part. Apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to see this report because I have been at Environment Committee seeing the reports when we didn't take this forward, when we didn't take electric vehicles forward, and I told other people on the committee, please carry on voting for these because it will come. So I feel like I've been vindicated in my confidence. I'm really pleased to see the HVO sourcing in there because I know that that has been a problem elsewhere in the market with, you know, the oil not coming from the right place. But I also want to be a little bit philosophical here in that we take lots of time writing action plans. We've got the Environmental Sustainability Strategy Refresh coming up. On page 96, there's a fabulous pie chart which shows the proportion of carbon emissions from 23 to 24 that is our fleet. And it's a really lovely visual representation to show the importance of what we're doing from a carbon point of view. And obviously, you know, from the electric point of view, this is a plea to government. We need government funding specifically for electric charging for councils if we're going to do this. I can't see councils ever going to be able to fund it themselves. So going back to the air pollution, I think the real difference for me is that everyone sees a refuse vehicle go in front of their house at least once, maybe twice a week with the garden waste. There aren't many vehicles that go at that speed, because it's quite slow, around every street in the city producing that air pollution. So I know that we've got corridors, particularly in the city, where we've got really bonkers air pollution, and you can see this now from the machines that we've got up. You know, the Barbourne Road, the Tithing, you know, other places, yeah, around the city. But these are vehicles that go on every single road. And, you know, I know residents who suffer from asthma, who suffer from poor air pollution. I've got, you know, there are children who have got inhalers, who are really struggling. We don't know what the impact of poor air pollution is long term on our residents and on our people. You know, in the future, we're going to have elderly people, you know, who've got breathing issues. We don't know what the impact is on dementia, dementia rates and other health issues. The NHS is struggling already. You know, it's a shame we can't quantify the saving for health issues that you get when you say spend £17,000 a year on a different fuel. And to me, I sit on P&R and I will be representing that point of view to the members there in support of this. Thank you.
Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point, just quickly looking, it looks as though there's no sulphur content in there, which you'd imagine actually from vegetable oils. I wouldn't have thought there'd be any sulphur, so that's good news as well. As a newcomer to this committee, this report looks very exciting, so I'm really pleased to see this sort of thing being discussed, very much supported. I just wanted to just check one thing on the numbers, if I may. You mentioned that we're looking at this 17,000 uplift to the fuel budget, is that right? So is that based on the 139 a litre price, which in itself is quite a generous allowance above it? You're saying normally it's 15p more, and the 139 is 30. So there's a little bit of inbuilt headroom. Is that correct in those numbers? Thank you.
So the budget, the fuel budget uplift that's part of the recommendation is based on the current price of HVO fuel. So we had some headroom within the budget existing because it was based on diesel prices. But if HVO fuel was to go up any further, then that would be an in-year budget pressure.
Councillor Scott.
Can I just responding to Councillor Lewin's point about air pollution, and I completely accept that carbon will be reduced by this. Our carbon figures as a council will make a massive input, but in terms of the health problems of particulates and nitrous oxides, you haven't given any data on this. You just say loosely that they expect to be reduced, but could we have some actual figures on that, please?
Chair, I think the report actually mentions a percentage reduction for both nitrous oxides and for particulate matter. And my computer is frozen. So I can't point Councillor Scott to them. Paragraph 2.42. So that references the reduction in both NOx and particulate matter associated with HVO fuel.
Councillor Subject.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit more on that. At 2.42, I did notice it says it reduces particulates by up to 84%. And it would be good to be quite clear when we're communicating this out to our community what our expectations are here. Because obviously diesel emissions have been in the news for the last number of years, that they haven't been accurately in real use, what was suggested by the manufacturers. So I do support the use of this fuel, but we ought to also recognise that what comes out the exhaust pipe is not a reduction in carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide within Worcester City comes out the exhaust pipe just the same as it does with diesel. The carbon saving is to do with a life cycle analysis. And then when you look at that, and like I say, I do support it as a renewable fuel, you do need to look at the sourcing, and I think that will be a debate that runs for a long time, over many years. So I'm happy that our council takes an initiative here, and it's like a market leader, and it might boost the market, and I think that's very worthwhile. But I think not only do we need to review the price, but we need to review where the fuel is coming from, where it's being processed or refined, because my understanding is we don't have refinery facilities in the UK at the moment. But of course, with this added demand, that might not, someone might venture to do that. When I'm also looking at this budget cost, it is quite significant, and I do appreciate that not only P&R but the budget setting exercise will be looking at this additional cost. And I'm conscious of the timeline that now indicates, because presumably we wouldn't agree our budget until next April, or just before then, which means then you do the procurements, which could easily take a year, which means we're right on the cusp of becoming part of a wider council, which means this issue about the tank and the county council owning the tank at the moment starts to become a bit greyer. Who's going to own the depot? Where will the investment, could the investment be in a bigger tank, or doesn't need to be in a tank at all? So I think for me, there's quite a lot of other questions in here, which presumably can start to be addressed in the budget setting exercise, and as PRE start to deliberate it.
Chair, just to come back on some of those and hopefully provide a bit of reassurance. Councillor Sobchak's correct. So budget setting will be February. So we'll get a decision ahead of April, towards the end of February. And if the approval was granted, then we can move into progressing the project. I certainly wouldn't expect procurement to take a year. You know, we've procured trucks for millions of pounds. That have taken us 3 to 4 months, for example. So I certainly wouldn't expect this to take a year. Obviously, we've got the tank to think about fitting in as well. But I would see it being a project that would certainly be delivered during 26 to 27, ahead of April 27. So hopefully that provides a little bit of reassurance around timeline. And that point around the sourcing of HVO, as we said in the report, we're under sort of a legal duty around how we procure materials to ensure that they meet sort of social duty obligations. But we know how serious you as members and we as officers take the matter as well. So we would look to be absolutely watertight during our procurement process around making sure that we source the correct material from the correct supplier.
Councillor Cross.
Picking up on the question about, or an inference talking about the reliability of emissions testing, I understand, am I right in thinking, and this may be a bit of a nerdy sort of question, not really about HVO as such, but the Euro 6 standards have addressed that by the requirement for real driving emissions testing, or RDE testing, and the redesign of the fuel delivery in combustion and after treatment, that even if just staying with the same diesel fuel, you're looking at improved fuel economy and power, typically with Euro 6 versus others. So basically, is there anything in there that I've said that doesn't chime right? Because obviously you're a professional fleet manager, but you know, so that we Euro 6 focusing on NOx, carbon monoxide, and total hydrocarbons and particulate matters, that's already within the standard. So what we hear is we're effectively proposing to use, or suggesting to use, the right fuel that will give even bigger benefits than of using diesel with the Euro 6 standard.
Yes, you are correct. Yeah, the Euro 6 engines in all of the current HGV vehicles is very efficient and does remove everything to the European standards of what they should be. But yeah, using HVO will obviously make those improvements as well.
Councillor Rudge.
Chair, as you know, I'm normally one step behind everybody else and playing a bit of catch up. So bear with me if these sound as if I've not been paying attention. First of all, can you clarify? I know you hinted at this, but just for the sake of my understanding, the MPG is the same in these vehicles with this fuel. That's my first question. There's no waste palm oil sludge, as Councillor Lewin was referring to. And the cost might come down if more people or more councils are using this fuel. Those are my understanding so far. Could you just clarify for me then where the fuel is coming from? How far is it travelling, as it were, to get here? I assume it's not Argentina or South Africa or somewhere.
So in terms of MPG, there's very little to no change in terms of the performance of the vehicles. Again, speaking to Malvern Hills, when they were switching over, and I was initially starting to look into it, they actually found on some of them they improved their MPG on certain routes. So there isn't going to be much of a change, if any, in that. In terms of the production, one of the the big concerns is that there is certain manufacturers out there that will put virgin palm oil rather than the waste palm oil into HVO streamline. There are regulatory bodies, and I can't remember the acronyms for them at the moment, that look at it from almost from cradle to grave in terms of the production of the waste oil, where that came from, what crops were grown from, etc., etc., etc. So we would just ensure that we source our HVO from accredited suppliers of those organisations. And then the third point, and I do apologise. Where's it come from? So all over the world is the honest answer. In terms of where we would get it from, I don't know. I haven't looked into it that far and that deep. In terms of which area of the world our HVO would be produced or stuff like that. I've just done the initial contacts with suppliers in terms of what the pricing would be, what their accreditations are, etc., etc. So I don't know if I could certainly find out and come back to you if you want me to.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking that the RFAS is a really solid standard, and that you know what information I've read correctly is that basically there's the assurance that there is not the use of damaging palm oil, for example, environmentally damaging, but that it's the focus on biomass waste and residues, used cooking oil, animal fats, etc., and that the RFAS is the gold standard for verifying the downstream chain of custody for renewable fuels in the UK. So it's not a Mickey Mouse certification scheme, but it's a proper one, and that we're on a solid footing to be anchoring. Is that a correct understanding, please?
It is, yes.
I'm not seeing any other hands. Does anyone else have any other questions? Councillor Scott.
I expect that when P&R look at this, they'll be going back to the points which Lloyd was making at the start about the savings which would be made, or reducing the amount of savings which are already in the bag from diesel. And reducing a saving is an extra cost. It's not a windfall, it's money which we could be spending on other things. So it's not like our free money to be using. We'll be looking at the finances of it in the whole. So I think that aspect that you explained verbally, I think needs to be set out clearly to Policy and Resources Committee, so we are aware of that when we get to look at the budget setting.
Yeah, we would do that as a matter of course, Chair, absolutely, yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions or observations on this? If not, I think we can safely say that we have noted the contents of the report and the rationale for the use of it. So then it comes to the question, are members wishing to endorse this proposal and the rationale that's set out in this? So if I can see a show of hands of all those who are in favour of endorsing the rationale. That is unanimous, and I think that's an important thing to note in the minutes, that it is a unanimous decision of this committee to endorse that proposal. So following on from that, are members of the committee, I would assume that it's a bit of a foregone conclusion, but we'll go through the process and check, happy to recommend to Policy and Resources Committee that through the budget setting process we would like them to consider the approval of an increase in the annual cost of the budget, recognising that what that becomes to, and taking on Councillor Scott's point about that there is money in the budget but it could have been cashable savings. Are people happy with that? Again, can I have a show of hands so we can be clear? Again, that is unanimous. And of course, then I'm going to still go through the process of doing the final vote, but in order to do all of that, are people happy to commit, subject to all of those, that actually £40,000 will go from the Sustainability Enabling Reserve if P&R approve all of those, because otherwise we haven't got a tank to put said fuel in? Show of hands. Again, unanimous. And then I'm going to assume that subject to that, we're going to have hang on, we're going to have approval of the recommendation to delegate to myself and Karen and Lloyd to go ahead. And everybody's going to vote in favour of that. And we're going to have a 5-minute adjournment.
Thank you, Chair. So this first report, we've got two strategies on the agenda tonight. This one is our second iteration of the sustainability strategy, which the current strategy comes to an end in 2025. That's 5 years since we've had an environmental sustainability strategy. So we're asking members to approve a refreshed strategy that's been developed following consultation and with the support of a cross-party steering group, and also to approve a new sustainability action plan, and as part of that process to close the existing plan. There's a lot of detail in the strategy in the report. I'll just look to bring out some highlights from the report if I can, and then clearly happy to take questions from members following that. Just to say, it's a really key point for us to approve a new strategy. It will be pivotal as we go through local government reorganisation, so ensuring there's the sustainability vision that this council has for the city is represented in the new authority or authorities as they are formed. So section 4, if I take you to that gives some context to this update really, and we've talked about in the previous item, we've talked about our carbon emissions. Our greenhouse gas reporting now covers a wider group of emission sources, so we've brought in our source 2s, which are our providers, such as Freedom Leisure, and there's been a 23% emissions reduction on that. There's been work done on solar PV at Purdeswell Leisure Centre. But the sort of headline figure there that if we were to include HVO, there would be around about a 2/3 reduction in the council's carbon footprint from the 2018-19 baseline. But even aside from the HVO, there's a considerable decrease there on the work that's been done on this strategy over the years. Section 5 talks about the consultation that we did. So we had nearly 200 responses to our survey from local residents. We also had responses from local businesses and community organisations. We would have probably liked to have some more from business and community organisations, but we made best efforts to receive submissions from those. Also used a staff survey, which gathered some very interesting views from officers across the council. A big part of this strategy is about what we're doing as a council, so it's very important to get those insights from service areas and from officers and from members. So some headlines at section 6 about the refreshed strategy. It's a point really to update the direction and focus of the council. 5 years into our strategy, local and regional and national changes have occurred. We've changed the format of the strategy to include opportunities and threats within each of the themes. Much more development of our climate adaptation theme, which has become more clearly understood over the past years. And there's some specific measures in the action plan about the need to improve our climate resilience, risk assessing our buildings and our assets, and vulnerability mapping of the city. And there is improved data now available about the expected climate changes and the impacts of those. There's some changes in the waste and the local authority responsibilities around that in Sandra's area of the business, which sit under the resource efficiency theme. Food waste and the producer responsibilities for packaging have come in since we approved the first strategy. And under carbon neutrality, we had quite some discussion around hydrogen. There's less emphasis on this now. It seems that it will have a role to play in industrial commercial settings, possibly for transport, but much less likely to be a big feature in residential settings, and focus there at government policies around electrification and the use of heat pumps. And we're doing some work on that on the Heat Network project. So looking at section 7, some headline actions to add into the action plan for 25 to 28. Some more work on decarbonisation of the cities, of our community centres. There's some studies being undertaken of that, and some work ongoing with an air source heat pump at King George V, and looking at some more solar PV works in the other centres. Solar PV has been quite a big feature for us actually over the last couple of years, and we're looking to see whether we can expand that. There was some discussion in the last item about the procurement, and sustainable procurement guidance is being developed. So we would look at source of goods that we were procuring, as well as the goods themselves. There's an ongoing piece of work into industrial decarbonisation, where we're seeking to bring businesses together in small clusters on industrial estates to see how they can work together productively at a very hyper-local level to decarbonise together. And members will be aware that recycling contamination campaigns, we continue to do that, and there's some more resource on the ground actually moving that forward. Section 8 just gives you an overview of the enabling reserve and what that's been used for over the years. There's currently just over £100,000 unallocated in that reserve, which is the sum actually that was set aside first of all when we set up the reserve. There's been some underspends, and we've been able to secure some more grants for work that we had put money set aside for, including the depot electrification feasibility studies. So it's a big piece of work that we ended up actually not having to fund very much at all. So just at 8.4, it just gives you the total there. Were we to allocate the capital for HVO, 65,000 would still be a significant sum, and the advice would be that would be sufficient sum to have to utilise on that reserve. Appendix 3, probably something to look at. I won't go through that in this meeting here, but that is progress of all the actions within the existing action plan. There were 39 actions in that plan, 32 of those have been completed now, so a significant amount of work, and I know I've talked through those in a bit more detail at this committee previously, so I won't go over them again tonight. 6 of them we've moved on to the new action plan. Just some highlights from the strategy and the themes really. The gas cremators at Astwood is a big impact on our emissions from buildings, as is solar PV that I've mentioned previously. Then emissions from fleet as second big emitter. Obviously members have discussed HVO this evening. Looking at the theme of carbon neutral Worcester, thank you for the question on the Warm Homes local grant. That's a big piece of work which will assist with that. And then looking at transport, our Beryl bike share schemes now, well over 50,000 journeys have been made on the bikes, so part of our town investment plan, something that we brought forward. Just a reminder, that's overseen by a Place and Economic Development Committee as part of their active travel work. There's 2 pieces of work going on looking at really industrial, commercial and other public sector. We're continuing to progress the heat networks study, which potentially is taking heat from the River Severn and looking at a heat network in the city, and we're working really closely with the university. I've just completed a piece of work with them on their options for their campus, as they would be one of the main users of such a network, were we to be able to facilitate that. And just a note at 12.8 about the industrial decarbonisation study, that's well advanced, and we've had significant external funding from Midlands Net Zero Hub to move that forward. So I think without going into any further detail, we've given a really thorough review of our existing strategy and action plan, and I'm pleased to commend to you tonight the new strategy and the new action plan, the recommendations that you approve those, and also, as previously, delegate authority to chair and vice chair to make any subsequent amendments to the action plan that, due to urgency, may not be able to be brought to a committee in the time frame. There are a couple of actions in there where we've been able to secure some quite significant grants at fairly short notice. This is often the way. So that's been done initially under chair and vice chair delegation and then reported back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a rule at this committee that you're not allowed to talk for too long, but we did let David have a slight exception to that, given the significance of this agenda, and even then it's very truncated what he's actually been able to talk about. I will assume that everybody has read the papers in full and knows a lot more about the detail of the very excellent work. I think it's timely just to say thank you to David and to his team, particularly people like Ruth with all the work that has gone into achieving so much to deliver the first action plan and put together this new one. So I just think it's really important to say thank you to Dave. And if you could pass those on to Ruth, I'm glad she's still with us, at least on a part-time basis. I'm then going to open up to the floor. I've got Councillor Holmes first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very excited about this. I think this is fantastic. This is the sort of thing that makes me want to be a councillor. To see our city moving forward, having this sort of strategy that other cities should be looking to and be proud of. I am very pleased. It's something I've been trying to do myself with my own house, and as such I have a slight apology. I am one of the 89 city residents that benefited from Solar Together. It gets mentioned at 12.2, and I only found out about it because of being a city councillor. At 12.3 we mentioned that this scheme's been looked forward to again. Is that are we looking at the county council doing that, not the city? Because we did raise it briefly with Lloyd, but it was thought it was more of a county council thing. Then I have got to, it's a little bit, it's the heat networks, very interested in using that sort of technology of an environmental recovery from the river. But I am going to query how the 1% losses of heat and transmission distribution is going to be working from the river out to all these buildings. I think 1% loss, that must be phenomenally well insulated, or there must be something I'm not understanding. And brilliant work on the grant funding. I think the grants are out there, and it's the only way to make these things pay in these hard times. If we can find the grants and we can get the money, there's been some very good grant gathering going on there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just quickly on the Solar Together, we did some investigation into actually the market and providers to be contracted, and we did talk to our neighbouring district councils, but on balance we decided that actually it was probably better to have a hiatus, a break for a year, and it is something that the county council, I suspect, will be leading on again, and hopefully in future years. The heat network technology is quite something really. I mean, they're very, very large pipes. The water isn't at it's reasonably low temperatures, which means that the losses are great and enormously insulated. So the technology is there that there's a very low heat loss.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report. Really enjoyed looking through it, and I did try and read as much of it as I could, but it was really interesting and very encouraging to see the work that has been carried on. Just got a few points and questions, if I may. Firstly, so this is the second iteration. So you started 2020. You've got your sights on 2030, carbon neutral. In your opinion, are we going to get there? I mean, it's difficult to, I guess, to sort of say, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is, are you happy with the progress that we're making so far? Is it where you wanted to be halfway through? Sort of linked to that, are there any lessons that you sort of learned that first half, the first 5 years? Have you changed approaches at all, or is it more, was this, this process is working well, the partnerships are in place? Is it sort of, carrying on more of the same? And then just finally, sorry to throw these questions. Really glad to see the climate change adaptation section. We've really got to start accepting, we can't keep writing plans and we've got to really start accepting it's going to happen. What are we doing to adapt to the climate change that's coming our way? I would have liked to have seen more pace, I think, in that section. So some of the end dates feel, for some of the bits of the first sort of couple of actions there, just sort of feel quite a long time. And are there any quick wins that we can be doing in this area rather than necessarily waiting for a plan to be written that tells us what we need to do? I'm thinking, for example, with planning, I know we're constrained by planning frameworks, but are there any sort of little tests and extra areas that we could put in that are hooks that as the planning committee can use to, for example, ask for more trees or for more water conservation or whatever? And I know there's the planning frameworks, but that's just one example. But are there some quick wins that we can do through the council that get us going on that pathway as soon as possible? So that's my points over. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thinking about are we happy with progress, I think we've made some real significant progress on some of the big items. So one of the first things is identifying where your big emitters were, which are heat and transport largely. So we've made some really good progress around solar PV. The electric chromators is an enormous chunk for us. You know, we were hopeful of electrification, but that's just not possible at the moment. So I think we are making good progress. The challenges that remain will be buildings such as this, which are very difficult to heat and very difficult to retrofit, and they just bring those huge challenges. Lessons learned. I think one of the things that's worked really well for us is when we've seen an opportunity, and when I say we, I talk largely about how my team and I've just gone for it. And if there's been a grant available, we've had discussions with chair and vice chair, and there's been some weekend and late night submissions of bids, but we've had some significant chunks of money, and the electrification of the depot, King George V air source heat pump, and the industrial decarbonisation study. Those are three that would spring to mind that were done pretty late at night. Some of those you don't often get a large window. So yeah, that would be lessons learned from that. Quick wins for climate change adaptation. I mean, there are some things coming up in the biodiversity strategy around tree canopy cover and tree planting, which I think would apply. There's some work going on at the moment, just looking at and auditing our buildings around their resilience to more intense rainfall, for instance, with historic buildings can bring some challenges. So those would be those. I think I probably need to give that a little bit more thought. There's a lot in that action plan, and we've looked to balance ambition with what's achievable with the resource that we have at our disposal.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you very much. I did enjoy helping sitting on the cross-party group which was writing this, and some very good ideas, and it was fulfilling activity. Could you say what you were thinking about in terms of the communication strategy for the new strategy when it's produced? How are we going to communicate about it to our citizens?
I think we use our usual channels. There's something in there as part of the consultation that some of the respondents were quite keen to receive some regular updates. And we've now got our email newsletter that residents can sign up to, which is, membership's growing of that all the time. I think there are two elements to this. One's the strategy, and then the other thing, some of the things that are really powerful are the projects that we're actually delivering, and they probably capture the imagination and perhaps more newsworthy and get picked up by media channels.
Are we planning to publish it or produce abbreviated leaflets or anything? Or all online? What are you thinking about?
We'll publish it online. Our existing strategy, there is an easier to read version, because there are a lot of pages in this, a lot of text. There's an easier to read online version, something that's accessible. So that would be our main method of publication.
And down to each one of us and like-minded citizens to make sure that we're spreading the good word about what's going on.
Thank you. Councillor Cross and then Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is clearly something very central to our purpose and function here, especially on the Environment Committee. I mean, having the strategy plan is, environment management is much more than just sort of estates management, but it's actually setting the direction, using our influence, etc. So, as we saw with change of council fleet vehicles, yes, we're to HVO will be addressing a chunk of emissions, but it's our role as influencing others near us is a very key part of this. So I'm slightly troubled about the sort of low response rates to the surveys thus far. How can we help get general public more on board? So please, I suppose, please feed us the right messaging that we can put out in our newsletters, etc., to residents. I'd be interested to hear how many responses and what quality of responses there were from the staff survey, how that compared against the public survey, so paragraph 5.4. I've got a question about something that sort of leapt out at me. Page 74, Heat Networks detailed project development study to complete in autumn 25 on page 74, yet on page 152, I think it is, it's saying January 26. And so I was just sort of trying to understand that one. And there were also a couple of, not just typos that sort of leapt out, but just sort of incomplete elements. When talking about the repair cafe, on page 131, and then on page 137, similarly, there's a sort of was sent to XX organisations, and it's just something. There's some gremlins in there that would be lovely to just get ironed out. I know it's a huge document; it's a lot of work, and it's just little gremlins that just sort of that people always notice and will pick up on them rather than actually the really positive work that's all behind this and the strategy. So it's I would just urge them as well. But yeah, the clarity on that date would be lovely to hear, the January 26 or the autumn 25.
Through you, Chair. A few points there, Councillor. Yeah, thank you. And proofreading is always a challenge, and particularly for officers that write these huge documents. Word blindness has become a thing after a while. Yes, we've talked at PNR quite a bit about how we achieve more response to public consultations, and it is a really thorny and difficult subject. And actually, you can just put more and more resource at it. I think reflecting on the staff survey, we had some really good responses from that, and we've really engaged all of our staff on sustainability, having had this strategy for 5 years. But a lot of that, I don't know, with Sandra's team, it would have been sitting down and having conversations rather than the form, and clearly doing that with the general public would be incredibly resource intensive to be able to do that. The heat networks, yes, absolutely. That project's evolved really, and it's become clear that the university are potentially a very key player in that. So we've shifted the scope of that to do a large piece of work on the university estate, which has just pushed that back. We would be talking about a potential project here for potentially external capital or the new authority. So there's a long timeline on a heat network over many, many years. So actually some slippage of months at this point is not really critical to what we're trying to set up is a feasibility study to put something that could go out to be looked at as a business case to be delivered in the future.
Thank you. And you know, we are a resource. Us members, we are a resource. Help us to help you. So feed us the information that we need to be providing and sharing with residents to help boost engagement. So very genuine offer of help there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points, if that's all right. When you look at this report, and then think back to how many people you've got in your team, David, and it's absolutely astounding. It's probably one of the smallest teams at the City Council, the amount of funding you've brought in, and also the work that they've been doing. What a tremendous team. So thank you to everyone there for their work. Of course, I know that a councillor talked about reaching our goals for 2030. I think what we're showing here is that we're doing what we can within our control, but without, you know, things like building regs improving, without government funding and national targets and national funding, you know, we are restricted by that as a council. So let's all make a plea to our local MP for that, please. One sad aspect of this report is, I know in the report it talks about car clubs and car share, and we know now that Enterprise are not doing the car club anymore in Worcester. Both sites don't have cars, and despite us and officers trying to get in touch with them, we don't know why. And what worries me is that as a planning chair, we often get applications coming through for central sites with very little car parking, and actually people who probably don't need a car very often, and a car club would actually really suit them. And I just hope it's something that could be brought forward if there's an opportunity. I know your officers are very good at spotting these opportunities. Maybe it's something we need to actually look at. I know that Malvern have got a community car club, for example. There may be some willing community people in Worcester who would do something similar. And then that brings me on to the Beryl Bike scheme. I know that that has got limited funding for a certain amount of time, and with local government reorganisation coming, it does worry me that things like that won't carry on. And you know, when we've worked so hard to bring something to the city, having stability of funding and future focus on something like that, I think is absolutely key. If there's future funding for it again, can we look out for that? I don't know when it runs out. I don't know if you can remind us, David, or what will happen to it, you know, when the money runs out. Is it actually self-funding yet? I don't know. But overall, you know, what a tremendous report. I really thank you for everything you've done, and I particularly also like the climate adaptation section. I think that has been well strengthened, and from the I went to the UK 100 conference actually, which is talked about here, and that was a huge aspect of it, knowing that actually climate change isn't something that's happening in the future, it's happening now. It's something that we have to look at now. We had flooding last year. It meant, for example, that some schools couldn't get hot food because it came over the bridge, and the bridge you couldn't get over it. So you know that creates challenges for people now. So thank you very much.
Chair, I think the question around the Beryl scheme. I'm not going to give you a date on that because I haven't got it in front of me at the moment, so I might be out by a year, but there's a sort of couple of years to run on that. The model for that was an injection of capital from the local authority at the start to help with the setup of the scheme. Clearly, the ridership, the usership of it is the key factor for that. We're very keen to discuss with Beryl, and actually have also involved their colleagues at the County Council in those discussions to look at the way that business is operating, to ensure that it is sustainable, and we would hope that that would become a self-funding scheme, and I would encourage everybody to use it because it is a really useful way of getting around the city.
One other thing, you know, I do get the sustainability newsletter, and I think it's absolutely brilliant, but I wish every resident got it. Could we please put something about it when we put the council tax out? You know, just to remind residents that that's a way that we are now communicating as a council through these email newsletters, because I think it'd be a really good way of letting residents know that we do this. Thank you.
Does anybody else, I think that's just been noted for officers to consider. Anybody else want to make any more contributions on this councillor subject?
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the strategy as well. I really like the themes that are in there, because it just sort of shows that we're looking at everything that goes on in the city, not just focusing on one thing. So the resource efficiency, the looking at the local economy and the natural environment as well. I think it's really good how it's all brought together. I was drawn to a pie chart because I like them on page 96, which is the council emissions, and obviously we've talked a lot about this with the fleet. It drew my attention to the other big segments, which is the leisure centres, which is 31% of our emissions at the moment. And on this sort of theme of it's like offsetting or buying a green tariff, I'm assuming that the leisure centres haven't provided that data. I think it does mention something in the report about we haven't got good data on energy usage from the leisure centres. But I will ask the question, do we know if they're on a green tariff? And then following that is, could at a future date, when we recommission, all the outsourced services that use our facilities, could we be, well, demanding that that green tariffs have used? Because if we do that, that 31% figure suddenly evaporates, doesn't it? Especially if you started to consider a gas offsetting scheme as well. And then the other figure is the crematorium, which we've mentioned as well, which is 15%. So in a few years' time, when we look at this pie chart with what we've already discussed this evening, it won't look different, because obviously what remains then expands out in the segment. And perhaps we lose a bit of the history of what we've already achieved over the last, well, a good number of years, I guess, because we're always looking at what we're still producing in a pie chart like this, rather than what we've already achieved and reduced it if we were just using the standard rates electricity, we never put solar panels on, etc.
So through you, Chair, I think I can answer with regards to those outsourced contracts. As far as why they're not using green tariff electricity at the moment. Clearly, that's something that can be considered and can be considered in future procurements. But there is a financial implication to that, which this council considered when we made the decision to move to green tariffs, and swimming pools are very large energy users, as I'm sure you're aware.
Do we have anybody else who would like to ask anything? If not, we're going to just move to, are people happy to approve the refreshed environmental sustainability strategy? Again, I think for coherence, is everybody happy? It's just useful to see that it is that level of people that are supporting it. That's unanimous. Are people happy to approve the related action plan? Again, unanimous, and by default, I think that means we're agreeing to close the existing action plan. And also, are people clear? Are people happy to delegate to myself and Karen for adding things in so that we can get the grant funding out? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you again to David and all his team for all of the work. An excellent piece of work with a few typos, which I'm sure Councillor Cross will send to you. Okay, so it's I assume back to you for that for the biodiversity strategy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so second strategy, and this strategy is one of the actions that was in our original sustainability strategy. I think something that we built into that. So it's a fairly simple request that you approve the biodiversity strategy to be adopted. There's an accompanying action plan. This strategy did come to this committee earlier in the year. So I won't go through it in detail. There are a number of changes to the original strategy. So the strategy sits under those 7 themes at 3.3, just recognising really that the council owns and manages an enormous amount of green space, so our potential to directly impact biodiversity through our own actions is high. We've built natural capital into this version of the strategy, which is the economic value of nature. It's quite a technical term. We've looked to put that in plain English, but it's really important to recognise the financial and economic value of nature, as well as all of the other benefits. So we ran a consultation over a couple of months earlier in the year. We did 2 surveys actually. We did one with the general public, and then we did more specific targeted with our specialist partners and experts in this area. We got some good support and overall support for the strategy itself. Section 5 talks about those key changes. So we changed our work, our target around tree planting to actually try and target that to areas of the city where there is what's known as an imbalance in tree equity. If you go on the Woodland Trust's website, they've got a really interesting tree equity map. And there are areas of the city which are more devoid of trees, not necessarily of green spaces all of the time, but have less trees and fewer trees in other areas of the city. We talked when we were at committee before about an ambition to sell biodiversity net gain units on our land, and perhaps there will be a market for that. There's been quite a change in sort of government policy and what we're expecting to come out in the legislation. So there's a lot of uncertainty around that. So we've taken that out as an action. It's not appropriate to spend time on that at the moment. And as I talked about, we talked about natural capital and the value of nature. And climate resilience has got more of a focus in here now. And then just some general changes, layout and readability. And hopefully we've picked up all of the typos, but I can't promise that. There's more detail at Appendix 2 if you wanted to look at that. So some of our key actions really in the plan, and I think probably the biggest one for us is establishing formal management plans for all of our sites, and Warwick's here tonight to talk about some of that. Really looking at how we can embed biodiversity enhancements and principles into the management of our land. Sustainability is now embedded across the council and is sort of very recognised as part of the work that everybody does, and biodiversity needs to be that as well, and is making some really good progress with that. There's some specific nature restoration projects on some of the sites utilising Section 106 funding, so those are listed in the action plan. And looking at reviewing and updating our green corridors map, used to be known as the Green Network some years ago, and also looking at dark corridors and light pollution and the effect on biodiversity of that. So without going into any more detail, and mindful members have seen the original strategy earlier in the year, I would commend that to you and happy to take any questions.
Thank you again. I think it's important to note that this is the same small team doing an amazing amount of work. Another very robust piece of work. I think at the moment I've only got one person indicating. I'm sure that will increase. So Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you very much for, I think, a really interesting and excellent piece of work. As someone, when I first came to Worcestershire, I was the Biodiversity Action Plan Officer, so it's quite interesting to see some familiar species names there. They're still on the list, but you know, that's good, that's fine. I just wanted to make one comment, just to welcome the funds that are available for the Lawnbrook work. Really pleased to see that. Part of that's in my ward. I want to ask specifically about trees and tree cover. So there's a few references in the document, and you talked earlier about kind of keeping going with the tree planting work. And there's a reference to increasing tree canopy cover, and the action plan talks about ensuring alignment with the forthcoming tree strategy. Should not that tree strategy have an action plan in it? I don't know how close it is to being completed, but that's a really important piece of work, and just make sure it does, going to have its full focus. Does it need an action itself, or maybe it's that far on that it's more about completing it? So it was just, and it was also just to make sure that we've got some really good targets and aims that we're going to achieve through that tree planting work, both in terms of the biodiversity gain and the shade and the heat temperatures and all that kind of stuff. So that was my main area to ask about. Thank you.
Thank you. I think just to comment on the tree strategy, they've almost been sort of two parallel strategies that are being developed together, and there is a huge overlap between the two of them. So I know that the team have been working closely with Alvin in development and planning on the development of that tree strategy. Yes, tree planting and targeted tree planting is something we need to get into the detail of that more and look for funding able to do that at some scale.
Councillor Lewin next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for this biodiversity strategy. I think when people think about biodiversity, often they're just thinking about, hedgehogs and, wildflowers. But you've got some really interesting and important aspects in this, which I think, is very educational for a lot of people as well. And I really actually like, on page 202, you've got a picture of the dark skies and the light pollution, knowing what impact that has on wildlife. And I just wonder about how this is going to be fed into other things that we do. For example, I know at PED last night, they talked about shop fronts and the importance of light and dark skies. So obviously it leads to planning, but then there's also, you know, the county council doing their work on street lights. You know, we've got to do something about this. The centre of Worcester, I mean, look at the light pollution, it's just frightening, isn't it? And also, with that, I know that we've got the Nature Forum, who are doing some important work in helping to deliver this strategy, because obviously a huge strategy, we can't possibly do it by ourselves. And I didn't know, David, whether you could talk a little bit more about that at all, please. Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the dark skies, it's the start of a piece of work for us, I think, starting to consider that. So I'm not going to sort of try and share any more detail because there's a lot more about that at the moment. The Nature Forum is a partner group, really, that the council's facilitated and our biodiversity officers facilitated, that includes a wide range of partners. I could try and name them, but there's probably about 15 or 20, so I will miss a good number of them out. But they meet on a regular basis in this room, and it's one of those groups. It's about bringing like-minded people together and seeing what synergies they can bounce off each other and deliver. And the council's doing a fair bit within this action plan, but there's an enormous amount more being done out there in the community by some of the statutory organisations and also some of these real hyper-local organisations that are working here. There's a Worcestershire reptile group, for instance, very specific. That's what I remembered as well. It's more well known, like the RSPB and the Canal Group, that's got a particular area of focus. Big overlap between those. So actually, by bringing those groups together, that's a really lively debate, and I think something that's really valuable and relatively low resource for the council to facilitate that.
Thank you, Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Really encouraged to hear those words again, and also just what you just said about encouraging volunteers and bringing them together and making use of them, empowering them, informing them, inspiring. I mean, having a cohesive strategy for our trees, green spaces and ponds, we're blessed with all of those in Warner Villages. We've got something like over 40 ponds still remaining out of the original 44, some of which are just ephemeral scrapes. And it's really important messaging about, for example, Lippard ponds. Yes, there's a problem of litter, and how on earth we engage with the people who are dropping litter in, but one can't just go willy-nilly going in and getting volunteers litter picking there at the wrong time of year, especially because actually there's a risk that there'll be newts in protected species inside the very pieces of litter that are being removed. So how we engage the hard to engage is really important. Making use of the resources. I mean, Warner Villages Parish Council with their neighbourhood plan several years ago, where the process started. You know, surveying all the ponds, green spaces, and you know, there's a lot of information to use. Are there really? Yes, we're responsible at the macro level, but at the micro level, where there's people really eyes on and involved, is about how we engage with and inform and inspire and retain all these volunteers. And you know, this is where I'm really concerned about the changes with our community engagement team. You know, yes, I totally get our budget concerns and all that, but it's like how we've got to achieve more work on less available money and time, and staff are already overstretched and working hard, and it's brilliant seeing the quality of output and the dedication to the job. Not quite sure where this is heading other than say fantastic work. How do we encourage people? How do we, you know, again, we members, how do we get people more inspired? Again, a plea for more information. You know, yes, we'll be encouraging people to sign up in that to the sustainability newsletters, and how we get these various groups together. So whether it's reptiles or whether it's the egg or whether it's other things, you know, there's lots of positive work going on and bringing it together. So thank you. Keep up your good work. Really appreciate it.
I think only to say I think Worcester is blessed actually with the huge natural resource and a huge resource of local people doing lots and lots of good work, and in some ways those are the best recruiters of more people. So the Nature Forum, I think, is a brilliant way of bringing people together and sort of sharing tactics as how to grow those groups and engage locally.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of, I may have answered my own question by looking at it, but I was wondering about the tree. It says canopy covered. Is this, are the trees counted? Are they on civic land, or are they everybody's garden, the whole of the city? I'd not even heard of a true service tree, and I thought I knew my trees. I planted I had a 180-foot garden in my last house, and I planted a hedge all the way down, and I had put specimen trees, and the whole bottom of that garden was turned over to nature. So I thought I knew my trees, and I've not even heard of a true service tree until this point. So I was wondering, as it's an endangered tree, are we going to be doing something to actually specifically bolster that in the city? And when it comes down to biodiversity, I think if we don't encourage insect life and that encourages birds and bats and things like that to find out, we won't be seeing the mammals because we won't have the insects. So I think, you know, if you don't put the structure back in, people stop noticing these things. They don't see the insects, they don't see the life, then they'd stop caring about it, and the next generation will care less than this generation. So it's important. I've seen how much less insect life there is in my own lifetime, and it's shocking how the loss of just those insects and the variety of those insects. And I certainly want to see a return to bigger numbers and the building base that they give to the rest of nature.
Thank you, Chair. So I think 3 points. The tree canopy cover, it's a really useful interactive map, and it's all land in the city. So I think it's done by satellite, and we'll circulate the link to that. It's very interesting reading, actually. That particular tree, I'll have to go away and look that up because it's not in the forefront of my mind at the moment. I'm sure it's in the report somewhere, but rather than taking 5 minutes to look it up now, we'll come back to you on that. Yeah, a really good point about insects and invertebrates. A lot of the focus of biodiversity work is on habitat. So it's about creating the habitat which then the species populate, rather than focusing on the species, which I think is a very interesting way of looking at it, just creating those conditions, and then nature finds a way, doesn't it? Yeah.
Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points for me. This is just an observation, really, about invasive non-native species. In doing the work I've been doing this summer with a neighbour at our local pond, it's the bulrushes, which are not non-native, to my knowledge anyway, that are really invasive, and they swamp a pond that's that small, if you like, and so that's what we've been taking out. So there is an issue with with native species that can also be invasive, that if you allow them to completely swamp a place, and then you've got reduced biodiversity. And working there, watching the sort of, I don't know, dragonflies lay eggs and whatever, it's a fascinating process. And it struck me that what we talk about, the natural capital, I don't know whether everybody understands what you mean by that, David, exactly. I think it may be worth clarifying so that we can sort of pass that message on, because I think it's underrated, if you like, that the value of the natural capital in so many areas. And lastly, I know the City Council have been working on land adoption, and in Warner Villages, Councillor Cross and I have sort of been tackling this for a long time. It's a very slow process to get land adopted, but there are huge chunks of land in our area that if they are adopted, then maybe we could plant a lot more trees, and rather than sneak out and put my own apple trees in the middle of, which I was tempted to do, I've only put one in, that it would be great if we could do a sort of systematic planting rather than a sort of ad hoc random rudge planting, so that we can make better use of that land.
Thank you. So the whole world stock of natural assets, which includes ecosystems and land living organisms, water, etc. But it sort of applies economic principles to that, so it does actually seek to put a value on that. So you can do a cost-benefit analysis, and there is a considerable value for the benefits that generate: food, clean water, leisure opportunities, climate regulation. All of those do actually have an economic value, as well as what you'd call their intrinsic value. The adoption of land in Warndon villages is something we've spent quite a bit of time on, and it's a big and complex project. But I agree with you, being able to sort of get a hold of it and have a strategy for all it would be beneficial.
Okay. Councillor Sobchak.
Always coming in late. What I wanted to I was just looking through the action plan, and I noticed that we haven't got a recommendation to adopt or approve the action plan as we did with the previous agenda, where it was a separate thing. And I'm wondering if that was because so many of the projects are already started or come from somewhere else. But what I really want to home in on, again, referencing the previous report where the recommendation at 1.4 was about delegating authority to chair, vice chair to approve subsequent amendments. Because there's a very interesting item in the action plan about biodiversity ward management plans. And I'd be very keen to understand this a bit more outside this meeting, because in my ward at Batten Hall, we have Cherry Orchard Local Nature Reserve. We've got an embryonic group very keen to do a lot of community work in there. They've drafted a management plan which the council officer now have had sight of. I'm not quite sure what those next steps are. I think we're trying to work out what work the council can do and what work the volunteers can do to improve what it looks like, accessibility, and of course biodiversity. So it'd be really good to kind of nail that and have that as a specific action if any particular ward does produce such a management plan. So it's about whether that is a possibility to be included, and whether this action plan will be ongoingly revised, if that's the right word, over the next 3 years, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, we'll keep all of these under review. The ward biodiversity plans, there's some work, I think some work's come to this committee previously, so some of that's about wildflower verges, and I was going to say very simple things, actually very effective things that the team have just got on and done ahead of having the biodiversity strategy. Yeah, I think I'll probably sort of own up and say, actually, I think we should probably, with this report, the recommendation should include the action plan, and it would be sensible, I think, to have the same delegation to chair and vice chair to update that ahead of committee timings if we could. So yeah, apologies for bringing something rather late. It was a rather simple recommendation to approve the strategy. I think it would be and action plan and delegate authority to chair and vice chair to make amendments as required to be reported to committee at a later date. Something like that, Margaret, please.
Fine, I'm happy to go through and we'll vote on that in a moment. Does anybody else want to ask any questions or make any contributions? Councillor Rudge.
Very quickly, Chair, just to give credit to the work done by WEG in my area, Ofton Lane in particular. They haven't quite finished, but creating a path around that pond, it's fantastic. And going back to my natural capital point, not just the pleasure of sort of creating, but the pleasure of walking around that pond, it's very hard to put a price on. But I think what we're trying to do is create environments wherever we are that where people can get out into green spaces and enjoy them and enjoy the natural world and enjoy the biodiversity that we're sort of trying to establish. So it's a lot of work, but WEG have done a fantastic job in helping us in that area, and I thought I wanted to minute that. Thanks.
Margaret will minute that. Okay. Does anybody else want to say anything before we move to a vote? In that case, we are being asked to vote on a slightly amended recommendation, which is we are being asked to approve the biodiversity strategy we are being asked to approve the Biodiversity Action Plan and to delegate authority to the Chair and Vice Chair to approve any subsequent amendments to the Action Plan that, due to the urgency, may not be able to be brought to the committee. I'm going to put all those three together just to save time, and is everybody happy to approve those three elements? If they are, if you could please raise your hand now. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. And that allows us to, and thank you again to Dave and his team, that allows us to move on to item 10, the Management of Green Spaces update.
Thank you, Chair. Standard, which, apologies, I forgot to press the button. We do have Premier Park standards which are under review. We felt that some of the images, and certainly we had feedback that some of the images almost felt that monoculture was preferred over biodiversity. So we're just reviewing those standards and how we present those at the moment to improve, or to be able to explain and interpret how we're managing our Premier Parks. Parks under increased scrutiny and supervision inspection because they're high footfall levels and both regional and local destinations. So we have to make sure that the standards are high, and so those are inspected for maintenance regularly throughout the year. And just I thought better put in some memorable achievements over the last 12 months. So in 3.8 we sort of detailed out in Gallowart Park, the council invested £366,000 in the splash pad, which opened in May and has been open 7 days a week for the whole summer, which is an achievement in itself. The Barbourne Road flower bed was redesigned, which I'm sure people have been past several times, hopefully they noticed rather than went straight past. There was a very successful VJ80 Day event run by the Worcester branch of Worcester and Sherwood Foresters Regiment in Gallowart Park. And so for Cripplegate Park, there was a very impressive tree sculpture that was created, the 2 tree chunks either side of the Sons of Rest building, which has received a lot of comment and praise. And that was organised by the Friends of Cripplegate Park, just echoing, I think, what councillors are saying about the value of volunteers in our open spaces. The multi-use games area was installed, again funded by the council, to replace an older piece of kit with youth facilities.
And Worcester Paint Festival carried on their series of art designs, murals in the park to lift the youth area of Cripplegate Park. In Fort Royal, again, success through volunteers. The wildlife rangers or the environment rangers in Fort Royal Park have hosted lots of volunteer networking groups, so networking for volunteers between groups to share ideas and successes, and they've been changing the landscape at Fort Royal by planting ferns and bulbs where grass was struggling, so we provide a better environment and also have less mowing. There was also a very significant VE Day 80 event in the May, which again supported by volunteers and stakeholders to provide a significant memory on the 80th anniversary for VE Day. And then also supported by another volunteer group, Battle of Worcester Society, the Liberty Oak was planted in the park. Then on Riverside, again, council investment in St Andrew's Gardens was delivered. Swan Sanctuary was supporting our avian flu pandemic, which obviously not a nice subject, but just identifies how hard work goes into managing open natural spaces. Keepax Bridge was opened, which links into Gillowart Park a bit, but obviously enables a lot of people to use the Riverside Park more through the figure of 8, as it were, between Diglas, New Road and Keepax. And there's a note there to how many pedestrians and cyclists have used it to date. And the Natural Network scheme was rolled out across all premier parks and other open spaces, improving bulb planting, wildflower creation and bird back box installations with interpretation boards to explain the benefits of the green spaces. Moving on to recreational grounds, these are large green open spaces with play areas surrounds and utilised for sports and outdoor games. So there's a citywide mowing route which covers those. We have made a slight late amendment to Appendix 2 after a request to show a bit more detail, because I think as individuals we probably have our own pet names for green spaces. So rather than just having a list of names with wards, but we've expanded that in the amended appendices for your information, so you can sort of see where we mean with an outlined map. Well, hopefully you can see where we mean with an outlined map. A lot of these areas, because they're for recreational purposes, are cut at 2.5 inches or 63.5 millimetre height, roughly on average. And they're mowed obviously throughout the year for the benefit of play and sport. And this team also covers hedge cutting then during the winter with sidearm flail on tractor. So some hedge cutting will happen during the summer based on sightlines and other health and safety issues. Then moving on to hedgerows and roadside verges. We manage a lot of the roadside verges on behalf of the county in speed limits of 30 and 40 miles per hour. The previous committees have adopted change in the management of those verges. So we've shown a little diagram of the aspect we try to create between hedge and verge where that is possible. To create a variety of habitats and then sort of phase the mowing to be able to deliver that. We have tried to look at raising the height of the grass cut. We trialled a section along Wood Green Drive this year where we raised the cutting height to 3.5 inches or 89 millimetres. To literally give wildflowers a bit of a chance of headroom to flower and they're obviously pollinators to propagate from. Unfortunately, with the 4 heat waves and the nature of Wood Green Drive, we couldn't actually complete the trial because all the grass died through the heat from the road and the pedestrian footway the other side. But
until the heat wave, it seemed to be working really well, where you'd had wildflowers hanging on the edge of the curb, literally to survive. You had clovers, vetches, and other wildflowers actually across the grass rather than just on the edges. So we're going to try that in all non-recreational amenity green space. We didn't get any complaints for long grass either. So I know we're trying to do it a little bit by stealth. We did warn councillors in that patch that's what we were doing, just in case they did have any inquiries. But we intend to to look at increasing the height of grass, and just a principle talking about climate changes. The principle is the longer the blade height, the longer the root system, and therefore the grass can access moisture for longer. Is the basic principle, as well as giving wildflowers the chance to pollinate. Moving on they also do litter and bin collection across the parks and sports pitches. There's 168 bins that they collect from. Going to sports pitches, we provide the natural turf football pitches across the city, which are available for the public to book. Obviously, the season goes from September to April, and those sites are listed. We've given you a flavour of the number of bookings over the last 3 years. Even though the number of bookings themselves have gone down, the number of games played seems to have had a bit of a tick up, and we'll be looking to increase the number of bookings and the number of games played by providing better quality pitches going forwards. And there's a little bit of support that team provide for the Purdeswell 3G pitch as well, with specialist equipment. Moving on to section 8, you can sort of see the requests we get through the website and customer services. There is to note there is a bit of an upkick in reports in 24-25. This is mainly down to the avian bird flu outbreak and people reporting where they've unfortunately seen dead birds. And then finally, aspirations for 26. We want to look at bespoke software for managing our green space assets. It means that we'll be able to do more bespoke solutions in certain locations, and it'll also give us a lot more business information about maintenance and time, resources, so that's something we're looking at with Witchaven, and we're specifically looking at our existing tree software and whether a new tree software package could also expand into green space management. And then also, as David's been talking about previously, we're looking to embed the biodiversity strategy and action plan across our green spaces. So I think I'll leave it there, if that's okay. Bit of a whistle-stop tour, but...
Thank you very much. I want to start by apologising to the team for creating such a lot of work for them by doing this piece of work. I do, however, think, as most of us are relatively new councillors, it's very important to have this sort of background information about some of the core council services that we deliver as a council, and have that level of information. And in order to do that, we do need the detail that's in this. On a very personal level, I had a bit of a light bulb moment when I was reading this, because I went, oh, this accounts for why, as a local member, I get all this flack of why does KGV not have any of the facilities and isn't treated the same, and it's very different to places like Gullivolt and Cripplegate, and actually, clearly, it is because it's designated completely differently. So it did prompt me, and I did warn you I was going to ask you, so I'm going to anyway. Clearly, it's a historical thing, but do we know how the decisions were made on which would become a Premier Park and which wouldn't? And I know it predates you in this role.
So yes, you did warn us that you're going to ask the question. So our reflection is that they were individually signed off at different times over the years, and it would have been around lottery applications, I think, pretty much. That's not to say that Brickfields hasn't had lottery, because it had Big Play lottery back in the day. And obviously with the Football Foundation funding that it's had. But yeah, I think they would have been individual commitments from the council over the years, where the funding would have had a requirement to have green flag standard as a part of that, and then the council adopting those standards and resources going forwards.
I actually also asked the former leader of the council whether he could account for the plan, and he said there wasn't one. So I think it's a little bit disappointing that there doesn't seem to be a very strategic approach to this, but I do think as members it's very interesting to now understand where we are now, and some of the work that you put there about some of the things that are happening are really positive, and with a wider role, when I take my elected member for Rainbow Hill hat off and put my wider environmental one on, you can see the real strength of that. It would be nice if we were in a different funding situation, if we could actually be reviewing to see strategically whether have we got the parks in the right place for the right communities. However, I am realistic, and the financial situation we're in at the moment, I know that's not something that we can do at this point. It would be nice to think that the new local authority, whatever that configuration is, does look across the whole area and at some point try and look at these sorts of things. Okay, that's me and my hobby horse, and I'm going to go to Councillor Holmes next.
Thank you, Chair. Bit of a random collection of questions here and observations. In your team members, 13 staff, do you still have somebody who's tree focused? Because there was a tree officer, and I met the tree team when I was planting trees at Cornbetter Rec, and very enthusiastic they were too. So, and then they had to dash off and fetch a willow that collapsed onto the road, so they all dashed off. Has the grass now grown back? Because we had a public speaker at the last full council that was asking, they were very concerned about the state of the grass and how dead and dried it looked. Has it's sprung back in my back garden, but I don't know if it's sprung back or been replaced, and whether it's been replaced with a more diverse mix. I'm very pleased with the Verge's idea and the different levels. I think that's important, not to have bowling green lawns everywhere, and fully supportive of that. And I have told one of your officers, if he had any complaints about Gulliver Park, they could come and talk to me, and I'd tell them that I'm quite happy with long grass. And the other sort of more of a technical point is the dead animal reporting. Do we think that's probably multiple posts on the same animal, and would that be adjusted, or did we really have 45 and 50? Yeah, were they all individual ones, or just all? Is that just a number of reports, or is that a number of actual deceased?
Okay, so the tree team aren't actually included in this report. So there is a team of 3, and they'll be contributing to a report you'll receive in the new year on ash dieback. But because we've increased that team with agency staff to be able to do the ash dieback report, but that's a core team of 3, and yet so they are still in existence, but not in this structure, different team. The grass has grown back, and my reflection is if you mess, you're going to slow down the grass recovery than if you actually just let it do its own thing. And that's a reflection of my own back garden, where I raked out some dead grass and it hasn't grown grass as fast. And then numbers-wise, it's a numbers game. So it's the number of people that have reported in individual reports. So no, it won't be the number of birds, it'll be the number of reports.
Councillor Kinsley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to pick up on grass again, if that's okay. There's long grass, and then there's this medium-sized grass. Really pleased to hear that you're trialling this slightly longer, still short, but just slightly longer, as you say. It encourages the root growth. And I would just encourage you to be bold, don't be stealthy. Just do it, and tell people why. I mean, especially after last summer. No one likes seeing, as we know, and we all know, no one likes seeing the brown grass, and it was quite apparent that the slightly longer grass survived better and it looked better, I think. And then you were going on to sort of Diggler's Fields, and it was like the Sahara. It was awful. It was awful. Whereas where it's been slightly longer, it does just survive better. So be bold and go for that. But and we can tell our residents why, and I think people will really understand nowadays that we're on this direction of travel. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lewin.
Yeah, thank you. I think this report is really helpful. I mean, one thing, 13 members of staff, the absolute metre squared that you maintain, the number of hedges that you cut, what an astonishing, achievement. not surprising sometimes that something might get missed, I suppose. But I really welcome you looking into new equipment and new technology. I think we can see the difference that's made in other areas of the service. So that's really great. And just really, I hope that with climate change, you know, learning from the grass last year, you know, you don't need to water grass. Grass recovers when there's rain. It's one thing that's got a really good root system. So to complain that it's not environmental to let grass go green when water is actually something that is going to be a problem in the future, us all having access to drinking water, it's another environmental consideration. And actually the planting bed outside Gillivant Park, I have noticed it, and also the bed next to the splash pad, which I do believe has never been watered. And that shows you that climate adaptation, we're already doing it. So thank you very much.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Another brilliant report and strategy and you know, a management update that incorporates the strategy, the roadside verge stratification. That, you know, the number of times that I've heard that call for the call for that to be commonplace, you know, really happy to support this. Very encouraged by this, indeed. And you know, bring it on. Absolutely fantastic. Really encouraged. So thank you very much. Keep it up.
Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to be negative, Warren. It's a genetic thing, I'm afraid. But it's actually, can you help is more my question. With the hedge flailing, I have some residents with very, 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 very expensive cars that they're very, very, very precious about, that are parked just the other side of the hedge, as it were, on Hastings Drive, for example. And they said to me, can you not just let us know when it's happening so we can move our very expensive cars? And I said, I can ask, because I'm a reasonable fellow. And I'm talking to a reasonable fellow. So if there's any possibility of knowing, obviously, I know you can't always be exact about the date, but even if it's just, I don't know, in that week or something, then I could warn residents. I don't mind doing the warning. It's just finding out exactly, rather than being caught out. And then the other, I do get some series of complaints, and Hastings is often one of them, again, where they say they haven't swept it up very well. And we're walking our dogs with, you know, thorns and debris and stuff left. Not great chunks of it, but, you know, there's a smattering of stuff left on the path. And again, residents are concerned about that.
So that is something where some software would help us, because we can update and share plans and routes very easily, where we can't at the moment. So we could create ward information and share routes and that sort of thing, as I said. So that's something that would help us, and also be more bespoke about when we do it and how. So that's hopefully answered your first question, and but I will, in the absence of that, see if we can come up with a hedge plan that we could potentially share in the meantime. The second point is that based on the size of the team and what they're doing, it is literally someone in the tractor and someone with the blower who's doing both the banksman bit of the health and safety and tidying up after. So we haven't got a massive resource to be able to, especially if it's a hedgerow which isn't going to probably react that well to blowing. So we could maybe look at combining teams or routes to see if we can pick up that debris or move that debris better. But I can't promise anything, but I can ask colleagues about what we could do potentially about, specifically when we're doing something like Hastings, where it's right on the pedway, whether there's an improvement we can make there.
If we don't have any other comments, this report is just for noting, but I do think it's important to thank officers for the amount of, we have very little on officer time, and it is a commitment of officer time to give us these sorts of reports, but I do think as a committee and as elected members it's useful that we do have that understanding of what's actually happening in our core services. So thank you very much, Warwick. And it's over to you for the last item on the agenda.
Just to feedback, obviously, informed councillors helps us do our job, because when you speak to residents, obviously it passes the information on to new audiences, which is good. So the last report is the glyphosate one. This is a subject that Environment Committee has received 2 previous reports on. And it's about alternative uses to glyphosate and trialling those pretty much. I'll very quickly say glyphosate it has been recognised as a highly effective herbicide. It's a systemic herbicide, which means that when the chemical gets into the plant, it goes right into the root and kills the plant at the root or nodes. Which makes it very effective rather than the plant being able to regenerate from or propagate from elements of the plant. It's still approved until December 2026, but there's always been a challenge over several years about whether it'll stay approved, so we don't know whether that'll continue going forwards. As a council, as a local authority, we are required to reduce the use of herbicide and specifically glyphosate as best practice. Environment Committee in 2024 that we agreed that the service sprays between March and September each year, commencing with a citywide spray to reduce the need for trimming around trees, post walls, fences and hedges. Along this side, the service carries out spot spraying within the council's premier parks, including the Riverside, but not within 5 metres of any watercourse. The council's car parks and Guildhall forecourt are also included in the use of glyphosate. So, but to note in 2.7, and this could partly be climate change as well, the amount of litres of herbicide that we've used has reduced as a service from 45 to 20 litres. But this could be, with the dry year, there's been less growth to actually spray off. So there are pros and cons to the hot weather. The key thing, though, is that we talked about invasive weeds earlier. Japanese knotweed specifically, our only known method of tackling that specific invasive weeds is with glyphosate, but there is a method of stem injection where it reduces the impact on the environment by how you apply it. And our officers are being trained to use stem injection on those locations. So our preferred option for reducing the use of glyphosate comes from the Pesticide Action Network UK, who have produced several reports and even a guide for local authorities on how to find and use alternative methods. There is no silver bullet, though, unfortunately. There is nothing that will just easily replace it. So it's going to be a bit of a pick and mix of solutions I'm recommending. The first is to try and design out the need of pesticides by landscaping, either by creating wider concrete bases so you don't need to strim or spray around a post or a piece of furniture, or by creating more of a, especially in the premier parks, maybe more of a cairn around posts so it looks a bit more attractive, or the use of bulbs or perennial herbaceous plants around trees, so you don't need to worry about the neatness of the edge around the tree itself, and therefore removes the need for treatment. Or the alternative is to cut an edge in the grass around the tree and fill with bark mulch to act as a weed suppressant. So that's one element, is to sort of design out the need for the use of herbicides and pesticides. The second is look for natural herbicides, which acetic acid is one, which is white vinegar. It could be used on tarmac and concrete and other hard surfaces as a as it's vinegar and it's biodegradable, there's no risk of bioaccumulation, but because it will break down naturally. But as an acid, we can't use it against furniture, specifically metal furniture, because of the corrosion it will cause on our assets, and obviously require more maintenance and replacement program. It isn't as effective on weeds as glyphosate, so it might need more applications more regularly. The other alternative natural chemical is sodium bicarbonate. It acts like a salt, which dehydrates the plant and stops it taking in water. This tends to be better used as a powder, so maybe in paving slabs or where it can be brushed into cracks, maybe the edge of walls and path areas. It's more effective on young growth rather than hardy mature growth, so probably in conjunction with weeding or one of the other methods. And you have to be a bit careful about where you use it, because it can change the pH of the soil. So if you're in a sensitive area for the environment, you won't want to change the pH of the soil, because that might affect the target plants that you're able to grow in those locations. We already use high pressure hot water treatments in the high street. We use it to clean hard surfaces of chewing gum and guano. It's very effective for control of weeds and mosses. However, it's fairly slow. It needs a lot of water supply, and it needs it's quite a large machine, so access is quite limited. So logistically, it's not an effective solution to use across the city, because you need quite a few of them, quite a lot of time and training, and so it could be used in targeted locations, but such as the city centre, but it's not advised for economic purposes to use it across the city. And then finally, mechanical weeding, so either using metal brushes, pedestrian wire brushes, motorised ones. We've bought a couple to deploy into our parks to see if we can use those as trial basis and widen that out. Alternative, you can use hose blades to cut plant material and damage the plant roots, and then obviously follow up with sodium bicarbonate if appropriate. By doing the manual approach, though, you will need to visit these locations more than the 3 times that you need with glyphosate. So there's an element of us understanding the capacity and constraints and resources available to be able to maintain alternative methods to glyphosate too. So we did consider some other alternatives, and I think previous reports have covered propane electric control systems and hot foam systems, and we basically ruled them out for effectiveness and harm to staff while using it, health and safety risks, and other reasons. So the recommendation is, I'm just going back up to the top of the page, that the committee supports the use of alternatives to glyphosate, which we've identified, the 4 pick and mix options, and that I'll bring back a report next year of how effective they've been, and maybe the resource implications that they've had in order to be able to use them effectively.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much for this report. I've had complaints about using chemicals in Gallivant Park, as you know, so this is extremely welcome. And I'm really pleased to see the bicarbonate of soda idea. I'm going to trial it on my drive, actually. I think that's a good, and maybe everyone can do that, and we can all feed back to Warwick whether it worked or not. Maybe some people want to do the acid instead. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much.
I know we have had a lot of discussions about this in the past, and it is getting late, which is, I think, why people have got less questions. However, if anybody's got anything, does anybody, any hands up at all? Councillor Holmes, you...
Yeah, just very quickly, yeah, I'm also very pleased about this. It was something I raised directly with the Green Spaces manager, because I'm not very keen on it. I wouldn't use it in my own garden. And also, I just think it's so harmful to us directly, let alone what it's doing to other animal life. It really isn't a pleasant chemical. I do remember Root Out being got rid of. Yeah, it was like, yeah, what are we actually trying to kill, the plant or ourselves?
Based on that and based on the discussions we've had, is everybody happy to support this trial and for the feedback. If you could raise your hand, you can then escape the room. Councillor Scott, are you voting in favour or abstain? You're abstaining. Would you like to tell us how you'd like to vote? In that case, thank you very much. That is unanimous, and that does conclude the meeting. So thank you very much.